Chapter 148. Yuchi was considering Guan Xiyu's reputation and interests. As Guan Xiyu's personal disciple, Guan Xiyu's interests were his interests. That was why he had said those words today. However, he hadn't expected Guan Xiyu to be so sensitive about Chu Yuanqing's matters. His actions had angered his master. At that moment, the door to the study was pushed open, and a fragrant wind blew in. Mei Qinglian walked in and waved her hand. She looked at Yuchi and said, "Did you make Master angry again?" "Really?" As she spoke, Mei Qinglian walked behind Guan Xiyu and squeezed his shoulder. "All right, Master. Yuchi is still young after all." He didn't think before speaking. It's actually not a big deal. With Mei Qinglian's arrival, Guan Xiyu's terrifying aura vanished, allowing Yuchi to heave a sigh of relief. Mei Qinglian said to Yuchi, "Aren't you going to apologize to your master? Remember, Master naturally has his reasons for doing things. Why is a young man like you meddling in?" Yuchi immediately bowed to Guan Xiyu and said, "Master, this disciple was wrong. I won't dare to do it again." Guan Xiyu waved her hand in annoyance and let Yuchi leave. Yuchi bowed to Mei Qinglian and said, "Thank you, Master's wife." Yuchi's attitude toward Mei Qinglian was even a little fearful. This woman was also his master's wife, but he didn't even dare to look at her. After Yuchi left, Guan Xiyu touched Mei Qinglian's hand behind her and sighed. "He's too selfish. Even Yuchi, the disciple I personally raised, now has selfish thoughts." Mei Qinglian hugged Guan Xiyu's neck and whispered in his ear, "Everyone has desires. Master, you can't control them even if you want to. Yuchi is still too young and can't see that far. The Guanzhong torture room is flourishing in your hands. No matter how famous the descendants of the Chu family are, they can't be more famous than you, Master. Even if you give the position to Chu Yuanqing now, he won't dare to take it. Yuchi, you're worrying for nothing." Glancing at the pile of documents on the table, Mei Qinglian softly said, "Let's deal with these tomorrow. This servant has stewed chicken soup. Master should rest early after eating." Guan Xiyu patted Mei Qinglian's hand and said with a smile, "Madam still cares about me. All right, I'll deal with it tomorrow." If others saw Guan Xiyu's current appearance, they would surely be greatly shocked. This was because Guan Xiyu usually gave people the impression that she was impartial, even to the point of being unreasonable. Most of the warriors in the Guanzhong torture room had never seen Guan Xiyu smile. Moreover, Guan Xiyu was also a person with extreme self-discipline. She had strict rules for her daily cultivation time and official business time. She could do more but she couldn't do less. She casually pushed what needed to be done today to tomorrow. This was not something that Guan Xiyu would do. The next morning, Yuchi arrived at Chu Xiu's residence early in the morning, preparing to follow Chu Xiu to Yanxi. At this moment, Yuchi's expression didn't change at all. He still wore a faint smile on his face, as if he wasn't the person who had been scolded by Guan Xiyu to the point of breaking out in a cold sweat. The area of Guanzhong was very large, even larger than the northern Yan region of Yanxi. From Guanzhong to Guanxi, Chu Xiu and Yuchi walked for a full 7 days. The Guanxi torture chamber branch was in Jianghu City. It was also a small city, but it was also abnormally prosperous. Guanxi was close to West Chu, and Jianghu City was the center of Guanxi. Merchants from West Chu conducted business here. As soon as they entered the city, Chu Xiu could feel a bustling atmosphere. Yuchi said, "There are many merchants from West Chu in Guanxi, so there are many West Chu products that are extremely rare in the outside world. Brother Chu, you can come and take a look when you have time. Before I came, I already sent a message to Lord Wei Juduan, the Guanxi torture chamber branch. He should be waiting for you in the Guanxi torture chamber branch. Let's go directly to the torture chamber." Chu Xiu nodded and followed Yuchi to the Guanxi torture chamber branch. The Guanxi torture chamber branch was basically a smaller version of the Guanzhong torture room. However, the signboard was ordinary black iron with the words, "Guanxi torture chamber branch" written on it. As soon as they entered the torture chamber, a few constables greeted them at the door. One of them said, "Lord Yuchi, Lord Wei is already waiting inside." Yuchi nodded and followed Chu Xiu into the meeting hall. There were 6 people in the meeting hall and one of them was sitting in the main seat. He looked like a skinny old man dressed in black. His hair was already white, but he had an imposing aura about him. The old man's eyes were sharp, and he was playing with 2 iron balls carved with golden dragon patterns. The most eye-catching thing about him was that he only had 4 fingers on his right hand. This person was Chu Xiu's future boss, the Guanxi torture chamber's 9-finger soul chasing Wei Juduan. He was a great master in the unity of heaven and man realm, but he didn't give Chu Xiu the feeling that he was as strong as the heavenly sin branch leader. There were 5 people sitting below Wei Juduan. They were all inspectors under Wei Juduan's command. Some of them had reached the level of 3 flowers at one's prominence, while others had even stepped into the 5 Chi's origin realm. At that moment all 5 of them were also sizing up Chu Xiu. Yuchi cupped his hands at Wei Juduan and said, "Greetings, Master Wei." Wei Juduan smiled and said, "Yuchi, you don't have to be so polite. I have already received the news from the torture chamber headquarters." Although Wei Juduan's strength and status were much higher than Yuchi's, his attitude toward Yuchi was very kind. But why did Chu Xiu become an inspector the moment he arrived? Most importantly, he was only in the physical invulnerability realm, the same as the constables under him. But now he was on equal footing with them. What? In the Jianghu it was common to judge one's strength based on strength. It was the same for Chu Xiu when he was in the Blue Dragon Society. Before he showed his strength, the people in the Blue Dragon Society weren't friendly. But the environment of the Guanzhong torture room was much more complicated than that of the Blue Dragon Society. In the Guanzhong torture room, not only did you have strength but you also had to have experience. But now Chu Xiu had nothing. He entered through the back door. Of course this made the others unhappy. Chu Xiu didn't care about these things. Instead he was confused about what Yuchi said just now. Just now Yuchi emphasized that he relied on Chu Yuanxing to enter the Guanzhong torture room. What did he mean? Was he afraid that the others didn't know that this was just a simple explanation, or was there some deeper meaning? But Yuchi's attitude was too well hidden. Chu Xiu couldn't see through his thoughts. Yuchi took out the warrant and handed it to Wei Juduan saying, "Lord Wei, I've brought the leader and the people. I have to report back to the main hall." Wei Juduan smiled and said, "Hall master still needs you to help with some chores. You're very busy so I won't keep you. Send my regards to hall master." Yuchi smiled and immediately turned to leave. After Yuchi left, Wei Juduan looked at Chu Xiu and said in a deep voice, "Chu Xiu, since hall master arranged for you to be a patrol, it means that hall master thinks highly of you. I also hope that you won't disappoint hall master. My previous patrol, Fang Jingyuan, died in an accident. His subordinates and the area he was in charge of will be handed over to you. You only need to remember one thing. The Guanzhong torture room has its own rules. There are rules in the open and in the dark. If you break the rules, even if you were recommended to the torture hall by Hero Chu, you won't be let off lightly." Chapter 149. Wei Juduan's words were as good as not saying anything at all. If anyone broke the rules, Guan Siyu wouldn't spare them even if he didn't say anything. But who had the final say in the secret rules? However, Chu Xiu had just arrived, so whatever his superior said was naturally the law. Therefore Chu Xiu didn't refute at all. He cupped his hands and said, "As you command, sir." Seeing Chu Xiu's attitude, Wei Juduan nodded in satisfaction. He was afraid that Chu Xiu wouldn't know his position because he was recommended by Chu Yuanxing. Now it seemed that he knew his place. Chu Yuanxing's position in the Guanzhong torture room was indeed very high. Because he was Chu Kuang's son, everyone was willing to give him face and give him the courtesy he deserved. But at the same time, if Chu Yuanxing interfered too much with the power of the Guanzhong torture room, a powerful torturer like Wei Juduan would be dissatisfied. Wei Juduan said to the other 5 torturers, "From now on, Chu Xiu will be your colleague, especially Wei Han and Jiang Taoran. Your territories are next to Chu Xiu's, so you should help each other out." Among the two, Jiang Taoran was a middle-aged man in his 40s. He had the strength of the 3-flower realm. Hearing this, he smiled at Chu Xiu, cupped his hands and said, "Brother Chu, you and I will be colleagues from now on." Chu Xiu also stood up and cupped his hands in return. As for Wei Han, he looked much younger. He only looked to be in his 30s and also had the strength of the 3-flower realm. However, he had entered this realm much earlier than Jiang Taoran. In reality he was already over 40 years old, but he looked relatively young. Facing Chu Xiu, Wei Han was much more casual. He only cupped his hands and called him Brother Chu. He didn't care about his reputation. He did not treat a physical invulnerability martial artist who entered through the back door as an equal. Wei Juduan coughed and said, "All right, that's all for today. All of you can return to your respective patrolling areas. Chu Xiu, after you go to the back hall to collect your clothes and the patrol envoy's token, you can take up your post." Chu Xiu cupped his hands and left with the other inspectors. The others did not have any intention of talking to Chu Xiu. Although there was no conflict of interest between them, it was clear that Chu Xiu was not qualified to be acknowledged by them with his background and strength. After collecting his clothes and waist tag, Chu Xiu left the Guanxi headquarters and headed to Jianzhou City in Jianzhou Prefecture. Guanxi was not as vast as northern Yin, so it was not divided into prefectures. It was only roughly divided into several prefectures. Jianghu Prefecture under the jurisdiction of Guanxi was one of them. Jianghu City was the center of Jianghu Prefecture, and there were more than 10 small cities around it that were also under the jurisdiction of Jianghu Prefecture. At this moment, the door of the patrol hall was tightly shut. 4 physical invulnerability Jianghu constables sat there in silence. The 4 of them were the strongest constables in the Jianghu patrol hall. After the death of the previous patrol envoy, all the constables and constables were under their control. One of them, a man in his 40s with a red knife scar on his face, laughed and said, "Everyone, don't be so quiet. The branch has already sent the news that the new patrol envoy will be taking up his post soon. We should discuss what to do, right?" Opposite him was a constable in his 50s. He wiped the long knife in his hand and said calmly, "What is there to discuss? Since the higher-ups have sent an important person, we should continue to follow orders. Otherwise, what do you want to do? Wu Siping, I know you are ambitious, but you can't really think that the higher-ups will let you be the patrol envoy, right? The Guangzhou torture room is not the same as it was in the past. There are many capable people. Even if Lord Fang Jingyuan is dead, the new patrol envoy will not be a physical invulnerability martial artist like you. There are countless mighty ones in the sentencing bureau. Any one of them can be the patrol envoy." Wu Siping snorted coldly and said, "Du Guangzhou, don't interrupt me. You know that's not what I'm talking about. During this period of time, there has been no patrol envoy, so we have only paid 60% of the taxes. The remaining 40% is split among us. Although I was the one who suggested this, the 3 of you have also taken it. Now that the new patrol envoy is here, this matter must not be leaked. Also, should we pay all the taxes or continue to hold it back?" The Guangzhou torture room was in between the Jianghu and the imperial court. Although it did not belong to any of the 3 countries, it still had all kinds of taxes. In particular, Guangzhou was originally the center of the 3 countries. The trade was unusually prosperous, and the taxes were a big part of the development of the Guangzhou torture room. Normally, the taxes would be collected by the lowest-ranking Jianghu constables and handed over to the patrol envoy. The patrol envoy would then hand it over to the torture chamber branch, and finally the branch would hand it over to the main hall. The main hall would hold back a portion of the taxes, and the rest would be distributed equally to the 3 countries. Therefore, in theory, the lowest-ranking Jianghu constables and patrol envoys were not allowed to hold back any of the taxes. All of them had to be handed over to the main hall, and the main hall would then distribute their salaries and cultivation resources according to their rank. Although this was a little troublesome, it could ensure that the Guangzhou torture room was fair and just. Now, the 4 of them actually dared to secretly hold back the taxes. This was a huge taboo. Du Guangzhou's hand that was wiping his long saber stopped abruptly. He said in a low voice, "Are you crazy? When there's no one watching over us, we can play some tricks on the books. Now that the higher-ups have sent a patrol envoy, you still dare to do this? Are you tired of living?" Wu Siping said coldly, "Old Du, you are too timid. Look at the other patrol envoys. Which one of them doesn't have some gray income? It's only that stubborn Fang Jingyuan who doesn't know how to be flexible. Even the rest of us are poor. I used to have a sworn brother who works in the torture chamber's headquarters. Yesterday he sent someone to tell me that the new patrol envoy is not a Jianghu constable. He was recommended by the Guangzhou hero Chu Yuanxing. He has never stayed in the Guangzhou torture room at all. He's just an outsider. The 4 of us working together, as long as we handle things on the surface, won't we be able to change the accounts in the dark? As long as we work together, it won't be a problem to make the other party a mere figurehead. An outsider becomes the patrol envoy of the Guangzhou torture room. He has no experience at all. Does he really think it's so easy to mingle in the Guangzhou torture room?" Du Guangzhou was still a little hesitant. "But, no buts." Wu Siping directly interrupted his words. He turned his gaze to the other 2 and said, "Qin Fang, Lu Qingli, what do you think?" The other 2 thought for a while and gritted their teeth. "Let's do it." If the new patrol envoy was a veteran of the Guangzhou torture room, they might not dare to play such tricks. But since it was an outsider who had never stayed in the Guangzhou torture room, they had some confidence. Wu Siping turned his gaze to Du Guangzhou and sneered, "Old Du, the 4 of us are one. If you don't agree to this, you'll be cutting off our source of income. You know the consequences. Don't forget how Lord Fang died. The current Guangzhou torture room is not the previous Guangzhou torture room." Listening to Wu Siping's words with some killing intent, Du Guangzhou's expression changed slightly. Du Guangzhong was a veteran of the Guangzhong torture room. His father was the Jianghu arrestor of the Guangzhong torture room. Wu Saiping was a lone robber who killed people like scything flax when he was young. After he was caught by the Jianghu arrestor of the Guangzhong torture room, he was willing to repent and chose to join the Guangzhong torture room to serve them. Du Guangzhong didn't know whether he had really repented after so many years, but his ferocity didn't change much. And just like what Wu Saiping said, the current Guangzhong torture room was not the previous Guangzhong torture room. As a veteran of the Guangzhong torture room, he felt it the most. Under the intense gaze of Wu Saiping and the other two, Du Guangzhong could only nod with difficulty. At that moment someone knocked on the door. A martial artist entered and said, "Sir, the new inspector has entered the city." Wu Saiping grinned and said, "Let's go and welcome the new sir. The three of you remember to have a good attitude. After all, this sir has a backer." After the previous inspector, Fang Jingyuan, passed away, the power of the entire inspector hall was in the hands of the four of them. Just like what Wu Saiping said before, it was easy for the three of them to make the new inspector a figurehead. However, he wouldn't play such a low-level trick like putting him in his place. The Guangzhong torture room had its own rules. After all, the new inspector was an inspector while they were just Jianghu arresters. Being one rank higher than them could crush others, so they couldn't afford to lose face. In Jianghu City, Chu Xiu rode a purplish-red horse and wore the black warrior attire of the Guangzhong torture room. On the left was a sword and saber symbol, just like the one erected at the entrance of the Guangzhong torture room. This also represented Chu Xiu's identity as an inspector. The disciplinary officers like Wei Juduan, who were in charge of an area, also wore such attire. However, the symbol of the sword and saber was on the right because the right was respected. This meant that their position was higher than that of the inspector. On the other hand, the symbol of the sword and saber in front of the disciplinary officer's chest was red. They were slightly different from the other Guangzhong torture room martial artists. However, existences at Wei Juduan's level could wear anything they wanted. As the pinnacle of power in the Guangzhong torture room, other than Guan Xiu, who was Guangzhong torture room chief, who didn't know them, Chu Xiu didn't ask where the inspector's hall was. The reason was simple. As the ruler of Guangzhong, the inspector's hall would definitely be in the center of the city. As expected, when Chu Xiu arrived at the inspector's hall, 4 physical invulnerability inspectors were already waiting for him. Seeing the sword and saber symbol embroidered on Chu Xiu's attire, Wu Saiping and the other 3 bowed to Chu Xiu in unison and said, "Greetings, sir." Chu Xiu jumped off the horse and said, "There's no need to be so polite. Are you the Jianghu constables mentioned by the inspector's hall?" Wu Saiping was about to answer, but when he felt the aura on Chu Xiu, he was stunned. Du Guangzhong and the others were the same. Physical invulnerability? The new inspector was actually only in the physical invulnerability stage. What kind of joke was this? Chapter 150. When Wu Saiping and the others saw that Chu Xiu was young, they didn't pay much attention. There were 5 tiers of Qi-controlling realm. Among them, the inner and outer invulnerability were 1 tier of experience. The 3 flowers at one's prominence and 5 Qis collecting were another, and the oneness of heaven and man was another. A big realm included 3 experiences and 5 small realms. When a martial artist stepped into the 3 flowers at one's prominence realm, the essence, Qi and spirit in the body would be unified and reach the extreme. After condensing the 3 flowers at one's prominence, one's lifespan would be greatly increased, and one would be able to slow down aging. Therefore, the younger a martial artist was when they stepped into the 3 flowers at one's prominence realm, the younger they would look in the future. Sometimes, 2 martial artists of the same age in the same realm would look like a young man and a middle-aged man. That was because the 2 of them were at different ages when they stepped into the 3 flowers at one's prominence realm. Therefore, when they first saw Chu Xiu, they subconsciously thought that Chu Xiu had stepped into the 3 flowers at one's prominence very early, which was why he looked young. However, when they got off the horse and got closer, they felt the aura on Chu Xiu's body. This guy didn't step into the 3 flowers at one's prominence early at all. His good friend at the main hall only told him that the new inspector was an outsider, but he didn't tell him that the new inspector was only in the physical invulnerability realm. This discovery immediately made Wu Saiping feel very sullen, and he even felt a bit unwilling and resentful. Just now, Du Guangzhong told him that even if the previous inspector, Fang Jingyuan, died, the torture chamber wouldn't let him be the inspector because he was only in the physical invulnerability realm. However, as soon as he said this, the higher-ups sent a martial artist in the physical invulnerability realm to be the inspector. He had no experience in the Guangzhong torture room and had no qualifications. Just because he was recommended to the torture chamber by the Guanzhong hero Chu Yuanxing, he could become an inspector in one step? Wu Saiping felt very unfair and very dissatisfied. When Chu Xiu saw the expressions of Wu Saiping and the others, he could roughly guess what they were thinking. Chu Xiu just said calmly, "Everyone, is there a problem?" Wu Saiping suppressed the emotions in his heart and cupped his hands towards Chu Xiu. "Of course there's no problem. Please come in, sir." Chu Xiu and Wu Saiping entered the meeting hall and sat on the host's seat. Chu Xiu took out his order and handed it to the four people and said, "This one is Chu Xiu. From today onwards I will take over the position of patrol envoy. This is the order signed by Hall Leader Guan and Lord Wei. You can take a look." Wu Saiping smiled and said, "How can this thing be fake?" Subordinate Wu Saiping greets sir. With that, Wu Saiping stood up and bowed to Chu Xiu. The other three also stood up and said in unison, "Subordinates Du Guangzhong, Lu Qingli and Qin Fang greet sir." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "You don't have to be so polite. I'm also new here, so I still need the help of a few veteran detectives." Du Guangzhong and the others looked at each other. This new patrol envoy seemed to be very easy to talk to. Although he was young, he didn't appear to be that overbearing. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "But because I'm new here, I don't know much about the information of the places under my command. As far as I know, the patrol envoy is mainly responsible for the daily activities of the territory under their command. Is there anything unusual during this period?" Wu Saiping shook his head and said, "Everything is calm, there's nothing unusual." Chu Xiu's eyes narrowed when he heard that. There wasn't a patrol inspector overseeing the territory for a month, and there are a few cities around the trade route. You're telling me that there weren't any abnormalities during this period? Wu Saiping said lightly, "Nothing means nothing. This should be a good thing. Does sir want something to happen in our territory?" Du Guangzhong and the other two looked at Wu Saiping in surprise. Just now, the person who said that he wouldn't put the new patrol envoy in his place was Wu Saiping, but now Wu Saiping seemed to be at odds with this Sir Chu Xiu, which confused them. In fact, Wu Saiping's thinking was very simple. If the new patrol envoy had the cultivation of the three-flower realm at one's prominence, then he would naturally have to keep a low profile and play some tricks in the dark. However, the other party was only at the physical invulnerability stage, which made him a little dissatisfied. At the same time, he also felt a little more confident. In his opinion, this new patrol envoy was just someone who got his position because of Chu Yuanxing's recommendation. Wu Saiping wasn't afraid of the other party at all. Although Chu Yuanxing's status in the Guanzhong torture room was high, he still couldn't interfere with the specific affairs of the torture chamber. That would break the rules of the torture chamber and cause some people in the torture chamber to be dissatisfied. In the past, it was one thing for Chu Yuanxing to plant people in the Guanzhong torture room. Most of the time he did it unintentionally and with good intentions. However, if those people suffered any grievances in the torture chamber and went to Chu Yuanxing to stand up for them, then would the Guanzhong torture room belong to him, Chu Yuanxing, or Guan Xiu? Although Chu Yuanxing was a little naive, he at least knew when to advance and when to retreat. He would never interfere in such things. Putting aside his identity as Chu Yuanxing, Wu Saiping didn't think he was inferior to the other party at all. Chu Xiu looked at Wu Saiping for a while, then turned his head to Du Guangzhong and the others and said, "The territory under your jurisdiction is also peaceful?" The three of them hesitated for a moment, then nodded. The four of them had a common weakness in each other's hands. Moreover, they had already reached an agreement just now. Now they would naturally suffer together. Seeing this scene, a cold light flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes. As a superior, it was actually not a good thing for his subordinates to be too united. This was because it would easily lead to deceiving his superiors and subordinates. In the past, because Chu Xiu was too close to the Ghost Hand King and the others, the Heavenly Sin Branch leader tried to sow discord between them. Unfortunately, he failed in the end. This was because his methods weren't brilliant, and Chu Xiu and the Ghost Hand King weren't idiots. They didn't expose this matter, but they still had a certain sense of distance when doing things. It was very ironic now that Chu Xiu actually encountered such a situation. However, this time he was the superior and his subordinates were even more ruthless. They actually dared to unite in front of him to undermine him. Were the constables of the Guanzhong torture room so bold? However, at this time, Chu Xiu didn't flare up. He just said lightly, "It's good that it's peaceful. It means that my work in the future will be very easy. Alright, all of you can leave." Seeing Chu Xiu's attitude, Wu Saiping couldn't help but smile. He cupped his hands at Chu Xiu and said, "Then I'll take my leave." He had already expected this scene. There were only 3 reactions from Chu Xiu. The first one was to turn hostile on the spot, but that would be embarrassing himself. Anyway, Wu Siping and the others had done enough to save face. What else did Chu Xiu want? The second one was to use his status to oppress others, but it was also useless. They were all veterans of the Guanzhong torture room. It wasn't easy to deal with the constables of the physical invulnerability realm. At least, Chu Xiu didn't have the qualifications to do so. They had to report to the Guanxi torture room branch. Only when they had enough evidence could they take action against him. Not to mention that they couldn't find fault with their attitude. Even if they scolded Chu Xiu, it still wouldn't be a crime worthy of death. At most, they would be transferred away from Chu Xiu's subordinates. Anyway, they had taken what they should take. Even if they were transferred away, they would still be constables in the Jianghu torture room. On the other hand, Chu Xiu would leave Wei Juduan with the impression that he was incompetent and couldn't even manage his own subordinates. As for the last one, it was to act as if nothing had happened and bear with it. After exiting the inspector hall, Du Guangzhong said in a low voice, "Didn't we go too far today?" Wu Siping sneered and said, "Too far? We just wanted to let this young inspector know the reality. That is, who is in charge here. He didn't make things difficult for us. We helped him handle the matters in the territory properly. All he needed to do was sit there and wait for the credit to fall into his hands. If he really doesn't know what's good for him, then we will make him suffer for a while. That way he will know that the waters of the Guanzhong torture room are deep. You all saw the inspector's attitude today. He isn't an idiot. He knows to bear with it. What are you all worried about?" Du Guangzhong and the others nodded. They felt that what Wu Siping said made sense. It was a pity that they didn't understand Chu Xiu. Under normal circumstances, Chu Xiu could indeed bear with it. However, there was a knife above the word bear. After he had endured, it was usually to make the knife stronger and sharper. After nightfall, Chu Xiu stayed in the inspector hall. Of course, Chu Xiu could also buy a big house outside. After all, the Guanzhong torture room didn't require torturers and inspectors to stay in the branch and hall. A blood condensation realm constable on night duty brought Chu Xiu to his residence. After arranging some daily necessities, he was about to leave in a hurry. If it was under normal circumstances, a small constable like him would definitely take the opportunity to curry favor with a new inspector. However, he didn't dare to do so now. The inspector hall was only so big. All the constables who came and went knew that the new inspector was only in the physical invulnerability realm. Moreover, he was an outsider. Not only did he fail to control the situation, but he was also captured by Sir Wu Siping. Although it was rumored that this inspector had suffered in front of a few constables, he wasn't someone a small constable like him could afford to offend. Therefore, his attitude was still respectful. However, he didn't dare to speak too much to the new inspector. Otherwise, what would happen if Sir Wu Siping and the others found out? He was just an ordinary small constable. At this moment he had already made up his mind. He wouldn't offend either side, nor would he curry favor with either. The battle between the big shots had nothing to do with a small fry like him. However, this was how things were. What one feared would happen. Just as the small constable was about to leave, he heard Chu Xiu say softly, "Don't be in a hurry to leave. I have something to ask you." Chapter 151. Hearing Chu Xiu's voice, the young constable put on a long face and said, "Sir, I really don't know anything." Chu Xiu said, "You know what I want to ask you, so you say you don't know anything?" The young constable said helplessly, "Sir, I can't afford to offend you and Sir Wu Siping. Why do you have to make things difficult for a small fry like me?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Since you know you can't afford to offend me, why waste your breath? Wu Siping isn't here now, but I'm right in front of you. Close the door. Don't worry, I won't leak anything you say. Of course, if you don't say anything, then you're offending me." The little constable was dumbfounded. The lord in front of him was clearly unreasonable. What could he do? Therefore, the young constable could only close the door obediently. He said helplessly, "Sir, please ask whatever you want to ask. However, I've only joined the Guanzhong torture room for a few years. I've only joined Sir Fang a few months ago. Therefore, I don't know much." Chu Xiu said, "Don't worry, I won't ask you anything that will make things difficult for you. However, you'd better not play any tricks. You're not the only one on duty in the patrol hall. I'll ask the others what I got from you. If the two of you say different things, you know the consequences." The young constable was speechless. Although this new sir was young, he was very scheming. At the very least, he wouldn't be able to play any tricks in front of him. Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "Don't be nervous. What I'm asking is not a secret. Wu Saiping and the other physical invulnerability Jianghu constables, what's their background and their relationship with each other? Hearing Chu Xiu's question, the young constable heaved a sigh of relief. Almost everyone in the patrol hall knew about this. It was indeed not a secret. Even though the door was closed, the constable still lowered his voice and said, "Among the 4 constables, Lord Du Guangzhong is a veteran of the Guangzhong torture room. He has been a constable in the Guangzhong torture room since his father's generation. When Wu Saiping was young, he was said to have been a great bandit of the Jianghu. His methods were ruthless and he killed people like flies. In the end, he was captured by the punishment hall when he acted in Guangzhong. Instead, he chose to serve the punishment hall. As for Mr. Lu Qingli and Mr. Qin Fong, their family background was very ordinary. They were all ordinary people in Guangzhong. When they were young, they were selected to be trained in Guangzhong torture room because of their good talent. They started from the lowest level of arrestor and became Jianghu arresters now. As for their relationship, this subordinate can't say. However, Sir Wu Saiping is the strongest, and he is usually very forthright with his subordinates, so he is loved and respected by everyone. Lord Du Guangzhong couldn't stand Sir Wu Saiping's Jianghu aura, so both sides didn't see eye to eye. They had quarreled before, but there was no conflict. As for Mr. Lu Qingli and Mr. Qin Fong, they have been in the Guangzhong torture room for so many years and have their own loyal subordinates. They usually don't get too close to anyone, nor do they have any conflict with anyone. Chu Xiu rubbed his chin. Previously, the 4 people's attitude was obviously that they had joined forces to control him, and even wanted to make him a mere figurehead. However, listening to the young constable's words, the 4 people's relationship wasn't that good before. It could only be said that it wasn't too bad. However, now that he had arrived, the 4 of them were all targeting him. This was very strange. There must be a reason for them to do this. It could be for benefits or it could be a common threat. However, Chu Xiu didn't consider this point. He only said to the young constable, "All right, you can go." Hearing Chu Xiu's order, the young constable then left as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. In the morning of the next day, Chu Xiu sat alone in the inspector's hall. However, he sat there for a whole day without doing anything. Of course, the Guangzhong torture room wouldn't be so idle. However, the structure of the Guangzhong torture room was from the bottom to the top. The constable at the lowest level patrolled the area. Once they found something, they had to report it to the Jianghu constable above them. If the Jianghu constable could solve it, they would solve it themselves. If they couldn't, they had to inform the inspector above them. Normally, even if the Jianghu constable solved the problem by themselves, they had to report it to the inspector above them. However, Wu Saiping intercepted all the news from below and dealt with it himself. He wouldn't report it to Chu Xiu at all. If Chu Xiu asked, all he had to do was say that it was peaceful. What could Chu Xiu do to him? The 4 of them had been in the inspector's hall for at least 10 years. Their prestige was deeply rooted. As long as they didn't say anything, it was impossible for Chu Xiu to bypass them and directly command the lower-level constables. In other words, they wanted to make Chu Xiu a figurehead. An inspector was still an inspector, just that he didn't have any real power. At this time, in a room at the inspector's hall, Wu Saiping and the other 3 were all there. There were some dishes and wine in front of them. They looked very relaxed. Every Jianghu constable had an office in the inspector's hall. This place was Wu Saiping's office and study. However, at this time he treated it as a tavern. Du Guangzhong held a wine glass and said, "Aren't we going a little overboard by doing this?" Wu Saiping smiled disdainfully and said, "Old Du, you're a little too timid. It's not like the Guangzhong torture room has never had an inspector who was just a figurehead over the years. You're not capable enough, so who can you blame? This Chu Xiu isn't even hall leader Guan's disciple. What's there to be afraid of?" Du Guangzhong frowned and said, "I'm not talking about that. After all, Chu Xiu joined the Guangzhong torture room because of Great Hero Chu. If we do this, aren't we not giving Great Hero Chu face?" Wu Saiping squinted his eyes and said, "Old Du, don't talk so much nonsense. You should know who's in charge of the Guangzhong torture room now. Great Hero Chu also knows his limits. Why can't the person he recommended be just a figurehead? All these years, Great Hero Chu has recommended many people to the Guangzhong torture room. Have you seen who he has ever cared about? Great Hero Chu knows what he's doing. And Old Du, since you've already done it, there's no turning back. You've already collected all the taxes that should have been paid. Yesterday you also offended the inspector. Why do you want to turn back now? It's too late." Du Guangzhong snorted coldly and said, "Who said I regret it? I'm just telling you to be careful. Don't be too arrogant and make things worse. If you really fall out with him, it won't do anyone any good. Although he said so, Du Guangzhong was secretly shaking his head. The Guangzhong torture room had really changed a lot over the years. When he had just joined the Guangzhong torture room, Chu Kuanga was still the hall master. At that time, the Guangzhong torture room was definitely not like this. But now, the power of the Guangzhong torture room was several times or even 10 times stronger than before. However, the internal situation had changed a lot. People like Wu Siping who joined later no longer had much memory and respect for great hero Chu. Opposite him, Wu Siping chuckled and said, "It's good that you don't regret it. Come, let's drink." Just as he was about to raise his glass, someone suddenly knocked on the door. A constable walked in and said, "Sirs, the inspector wants to invite Sir Du Guangzhong over." Wu Siping frowned and said, "He wants to invite old Du over alone?" The constable nodded. Du Guangzhong was also puzzled and said, "Why does he want to invite me over?" Wu Siping waved his hand casually and said, "I think it's a little tricky to deal with the four of us together, so he wants to take us down one by one. Old Du, you just have to control yourself. Say what you should and don't say what you shouldn't. Anyway, just be respectful and say a few perfunctory words." Du Guangzhong nodded in puzzlement. Although he did not understand why Chu Xiu would invite him first, he still followed the constable out. After he left, Qin Fang frowned and said, "There won't be any problems, right?" Wu Siping said indifferently, "Don't worry. Old Du is usually a little overcautious, but it's not for nothing that he could survive in the Guangzhong torture room for so many years. He knows what to say and what not to say. When he comes back, I'll ask Chu Xiu what he said to him. I don't think there's anything new. Come, let's continue drinking." At that moment, Du Guangzhong came to Chu Xiu's study and knocked on the door. "Official Chu, I'm here. Come in." Chu Xiu's voice came from inside the room. When Du Guangzhong pushed the door open and entered, he found Chu Xiu sitting in the study, wiping his crimson, extremely magnificent long saber. "Close the door and sit down," Chu Xiu said without raising his head. Du Guangzhong was slightly puzzled. He thought that Chu Xiu was pretending to be profound, so he closed the door and sat down, ready to see what tricks Chu Xiu was playing. As a result, he sat there for a full hour, but Chu Xiu was still wiping his red sleeve saber. He even rubbed the saber until it was bright red and could be used as a mirror, but he still did not say a word. Du Guangzhong could not stand it anymore. He couldn't help but say, "What does official Chu want from me? If there's nothing else, I'll leave. There are still many things that I need to deal with in the inspector hall." Hearing that, Chu Xiu raised his head and said slowly, "Constable Du, are you in a hurry? Don't worry, it will be done soon." After that, Chu Xiu lowered his head and wiped the red sleeve saber in his hand again. This time he actually wiped it for another hour. Until Du Guangzhong really could not stand it anymore, Chu Xiu took the initiative to say, "I heard that Constable Du also uses a saber?" Du Guangzhong was suddenly stunned and subconsciously said, "Yes." "What do you think about sabers, Constable Du?" Chu Xiu suddenly asked. Du Guangzhong was stunned. He did not know what Chu Xiu meant by this question. He had to perfunctorily say, "It's a weapon. I've been practicing it since I was a child. What else can I think about it?" Chu Xiu put the red sleeve saber in his hand on the table and said in a deep voice, "Weapons also have a spirit. After being nourished, the wizard weapon above the seventh transformation will have a spirit. This spirit is not given by the heaven and earth, but by the user. The sword is the leader of all weapons. It can be yin or yang and it has thousands of changes. The saber is the king of all weapons. It has the aura of a king and is domineering. It is incomparably sharp and moves forward. This is my view on saber." Chapter 152. Du Guangzhong found Chu Xiu's explanation of the saber novel. Although he was an old man in the Guangzhong torture room, his father and grandfather's generation were just ordinary low-level constables. They didn't even have a physical invulnerability expert. His generation was already the strongest in the Du family. A martial artist of this level could only be considered decent in the underworld. It could be said that he had just stepped into the threshold of martial arts. His understanding of martial arts was very rough. To them, a saber was a saber. What else could it be? After listening to Chu Xiu's words, Du Guangzhong seemed to have understood something. He even pondered for a while. But then Du Guangzhong came to his senses. Why did he come here? He couldn't help but ask Chu Xiu, "Official Chu, it's been 2 hours. What do you want? You can't just talk about sabers and swords with me, right?" Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "It's fine. You can leave now." Chu Xiu's words stunned Du Guangzhong. Then, a trace of anger appeared in his eyes. If Chu Xiu wasn't an inspector, he would have fallen out with him long ago. He found me, sat with me for 2 hours, and asked me to leave after saying a few words. What is this? Is he messing with me? Du Guangzhong snorted and turned to leave in dissatisfaction. But at the moment when Du Guangzhong turned around, Chu Xiu sheathed his saber. The sharpness in his eyes was not inferior to the red-sleeve saber that he polished. At this time in Wu Saiping's room, Wu Saiping and the other two were waiting anxiously. Previously, they thought that Du Guangzhong was just pretending to be courteous with Chu Xiu and would come out soon. But it had been 2 hours. What were they talking about? Even if they were pretending to be courteous, it wouldn't take so long. Wu Saiping sent his confidant to check, but it was useless. The door of Chu Xiu's study was closed. He couldn't hear anything at all. This made Wu Saiping a little confused. At this time Du Guangzhong came back. Wu Saiping said quickly, "Old Du, what did Chu Xiu say to you?" Du Guangzhong said subconsciously, "Nothing." As soon as he said this, Wu Saiping, Lu Qingli and Qin Fang's gazes changed. Chu Xiu had called him into the study for an hour, but now Du Guangzhong said that Chu Xiu didn't say anything. It was too obvious that Du Guangzhong was trying to brush him off. Feeling the gazes of the three, Du Guangzhong said quickly, "I really didn't say anything. Official Chu just talked to me a little about saber skills." Hearing this, Wu Saiping sneered and said, "I didn't see it before. Old Du, your saber skills are so profound that even the inspector sent by the higher-ups wanted to learn from you. But the key is, do you believe it yourself?" Du Guangzhong was helpless. He said hurriedly, "Listen to my explanation." Wu Saiping waved his hand and interrupted Du Guangzhong. "Old Du, you and I are now in the same boat. No matter what Chu Xiu promised you, it's just an empty promise. Embezzlement is a big crime. It's fine if no one reports it. But once it is reported, we're finished. Chu Xiu can't protect you either. Now I'll give you one last chance. What did Chu Xiu say to you? Or should I say, what did he promise you?" Du Guangzhong looked like he was going crazy. "Chu Xiu really didn't say anything to me. He didn't promise me anything. How can I explain it to him?" Wu Saiping sneered. Well, Du Guangzhong, I underestimated you. You've decided to surrender to the new lord so quickly. Are you going to help me in my hour of need? Then let's wait and see who will have the last laugh." Finishing his words, Wu Saiping sneered and turned to leave. Lu Qingli and Qin Fang also took a deep look at Du Guangzhong and left. No matter where, traitors were always the most hateful. Obviously in their eyes Du Guangzhong was a traitor. Looking at the three of them leaving, Du Guangzhong's heart sank. Things seemed to be getting out of hand. This misunderstanding couldn't be explained clearly. At this time he suddenly remembered Chu Xiu's previous actions. Chu Xiu had called him over for no reason, but in the end he didn't say a word and only talked to him about some inexplicable things before letting him leave. Could it be that Chu Xiu did this on purpose? Thinking of this, Du Guangzhong felt a chill in his heart. If this was really the case, Chu Xiu was too terrifying. He didn't say anything and didn't promise anything, but he had already caused a rift between the four of them. Du Guangzhong left in a daze. Now, his mind was full of thoughts about what he should do to explain to Wu Saiping and the others. But the problem was that what he said was the truth. Chu Xiu didn't say anything to him at all. If he went back and told Wu Saiping and the others that Chu Xiu promised him something to win him over, would they believe him? Just like this, Du Guangzhong struggled for a night and didn't know how to explain. Right now, the four of them were actually in the same boat. There were no benefits between them, but they had their own weaknesses. If they fell out because of this inexplicable reason, the only one who would benefit would be Chu Xiu. The next morning, Du Guangzhong had just come out of his residence when he ran into Chu Xiu. Because of yesterday's incident, Du Guangzhong guessed that he had been schemed against by Chu Xiu, so he didn't have a good attitude towards Chu Xiu. However, Chu Xiu went up to greet him and said, "Constable Du is up early. Come with me to the Guangzhong General Hall today." Du Guangzhong frowned and said, "Why are we going there?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "It doesn't matter what we are going to do. Do you think I will eat you up?" Du Guangzhong was just about to find an excuse to refuse when Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "Don't refuse. Don't forget I am the patrol inspector now. Can't I ask you to temporarily put down all your subordinates' matters?" Du Guangzhong gritted his teeth and said, "Of course I can." Even if Chu Xiu didn't have any real power as the patrol inspector at the moment, and the few of them were only pretending to obey Chu Xiu and preparing to make him a mere figurehead, he was still the patrol inspector after all. If they really fell out, they would also be punished. Hearing Du Guangzhong's agreement, Chu Xiu asked someone to find 2 fast horses and followed Du Guangzhong to Guangzhong. After they left, Wu Siping's confidant immediately told him the matter. Wu Siping called Lu Qingli and Qin Fang over and sneered, "Yesterday Du Guangzhong just finished a secret talk with Chu Xiu and today he followed Chu Xiu to Guangzhong. If there is no deal between them, who would believe it?" Lu Qingli said hesitantly, "Yesterday I thought about it. Old Du shouldn't be an idiot. What is the benefit of him siding with this Chu Xiu? The 4 of us have something on each other. If he's siding with Chu Xiu, it is equivalent to sending his own weakness to Chu Xiu. At that time he will naturally be at the mercy of Chu Xiu. Will he do such a thing? So I feel that there should be some misunderstanding. Today he followed Chu Xiu to Guangzhong, it should be Chu Xiu's order. After all, he is the patrol inspector now. We can't refute things like face." Wu Siping snorted coldly and said, "Whether it is true or false will be seen with one look. I have brothers at the headquarters. I will send a letter to them to help me keep an eye on Chu Xiu and Du Guangzhong. We will see if this is a misunderstanding or if Du Guangzhong really betrayed us." The Guangzhong area was so large. If they relied on sending letters to pass messages, it would be too late when something really happened. Therefore, in the Guangzhong area, each of the Hall of Inspectors had a formation to transmit information to each other. However, the consumption of the formation was a bit high. Other than the important information being transmitted through the formation, the rest of the unimportant information still had to be transmitted through manpower. But now that Wu Siping had decided to make Chu Xiu a figurehead, he naturally didn't have to care about those rules and directly used public tools for private purposes. At this time, after Chu Xiu and Du Guangzhong set off, Du Guangzhong held it in for a long time and finally couldn't help asking Chu Xiu, "You did it on purpose yesterday?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Of course it was on purpose." Du Guangzhong was stunned. He didn't think that Chu Xiu would say it so directly without any concealment. Since Chu Xiu had made it clear, Du Guangzhong didn't hide it anymore. He snorted coldly and said, "Official Chu, do you think you can drive a wedge between us with these little tricks?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "But there's already a rift between you guys, isn't there? I know you guys aren't convinced of me. How can an outsider like me sit in this position so easily? If it were me, I wouldn't be convinced either. But it's important to know one's own limitations. Just based on the 4 of you with your own schemes, do you think it's possible to make me a figurehead?" Du Guangzhong sneered and said, "The waters of the Guangzhong torture room are deep. The entire Guangzhong area is filled with martial artists from all over the pugilistic world. The Guangzhong torture room is naturally the same. In history, there were inspectors who were made a figurehead by their subordinates, and there were even disciplinary officers who were made a figurehead by their subordinates. There are rules in the Guangzhong torture room. It's not like other places where you can sit in a high position just because you know how to fight and kill." Chu Xiu didn't argue. He just smiled and said, "All right, we'll wait and see." After a few days, Chu Xiu and Du Guangzhong arrived at Guangzhong City. However, after arriving at Guangzhong City, Chu Xiu just casually strolled around the disciplinary hall before bringing Du Guangzhong to look for Chu Yuanxing. Last time, Chu Yuanxing was chased by people and had yet to recover. During this period of time, he had been resting at home. Seeing that Chu Xiu had come and had someone to drink with him, Chu Yuanxing was in a good mood. "Brother, did something happen in the territory this time?" Chu Xiu gave some of the gifts he bought to the servants and said with a smile, "It's nothing, everything is going well. It's just that I can stand firm in the Guangzhong torture room because of your help, so today I'm here to thank you. By the way, this is my subordinate, Constable Du Guangzhong of the pugilistic world. He also admires you very much. I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to find the way, so I brought him here." Du Guangzhong, who was beside Chu Xiu, bowed to Chu Yuanxing with an excited expression and said, "Greetings, Hero Chu." Chapter 153. In all fairness, Du Guangzhong still respected Chu Yuanxing. However, this respect did not come from Chu Yuanxing, but from Chu Yuanxing's father, Wuxia Chu Kuanga. When Du Guangzhong first joined the Guangzhong torture room, Chu Kuanga was still in power. Chu Kuanga's charisma was indeed very strong. Even Du Guangzhong, who had never had any contact with Chu Kuanga, respected him. In his heart, the Guangzhong torture room at that time was the Guangzhong torture room at its peak. Now that Chu Kuanga was dead, his legacy had been passed on to Chu Yuanxing. Du Guangzhong still respected him, but not to the same extent as Chu Kuanga. For example, now that Chu Yuanxing asked him to listen to Chu Xiu, Du Guangzhong might agree, but whether he would execute it or not was an unknown. Originally, Chu Yuanxing thought that Chu Xiu had something to ask of him. However, Chu Xiu just had a meal with Du Guangzhong and then left. Even Du Guangzhong did not understand what Chu Xiu meant. However, Chu Xiu knew that what he had done in Guangzhong City with Du Guangzhong would definitely be reported to Wu Saiping. After all, the other party was an old man who had been in the Guangzhong torture room for more than a decade. He definitely had some connections. Chu Xiu was right. After Chu Xiu and Du Guangzhong left Guangzhong City, a middle-aged warrior immediately wrote down what Chu Xiu and Du Guangzhong had done in the city and passed it to the inspector hall. This person used to be like Wu Saiping, a Jianghu bandit. However, Wu Saiping was forced to surrender after being captured by the Guangzhong torture room. He was inspired by Wu Saiping and chose to join the Guangzhong torture room to clear his name, so the two naturally became good friends. His talent and strength were better than Wu Saiping's, so he was directly selected by the sentencing department and joined them. Wu Saiping, on the other hand, started as an ordinary constable. The relationship between the two was not bad. Every time Wu Saiping came to Guangzhong City, the two would meet up. Therefore, he did not refuse the simple task of using his authority to pass on information. He knew about Wu Saiping's situation. His friend was arrogant and ambitious. Even the inspector who had reached the stage of three flower at once prominence couldn't control him, let alone the inspector who had reached the stage of physical invulnerability. However, he also happened to hear about Chu Xiu from other people's conversations. Although the Longhu list had spread throughout the Jianghu for warriors like him who were no longer young, they did not pay much attention to it. Moreover, Chu Xiu was not one of the most famous people on the list. Therefore, when he first learned about Chu Xiu's identity, he was also stunned. He did not expect Chu Xiu to have such a strong background. He turned out to be a talent on the Longhu list. No wonder he could become an inspector right after joining the torture hall. Wu Saiping probably did not know about Chu Xiu's identity, so he also wanted to advise Wu Saiping to be careful and not treat Chu Xiu as an ordinary young physical invulnerability martial artist. Chu Xiu did not get his current position just because of his relationship with Chu Yuanxing. Therefore, he wrote another message and was about to pass it to Wu Saiping. However, he did not expect the formation pattern on the message formation to flicker and suddenly die out. It's broken? The warrior frowned, but he was not too worried. He just kept the letter with Chu Xiu's real identity and went out to find a formation master in the Guangzhong torture room to repair it. The message formation was often used, so it was not a big deal. He just needed to find a formation master to repair it. However, the repair time was a little long. A few days was considered fast, and a slow one could even take a month. But it did not matter. Anyway, there was more than one message formation in the Guangzhong torture room. However, he could only use this message formation at will. He could not touch the others. Therefore, this letter could not be sent to Wu Saiping for the time being. At this time, in the Guanxi region, in the inspector hall under the command of Chu Xiu, Wu Saiping received the news from Guangzhong City with a gloomy expression. He found Lu Yuqing and Qin Fang and threw the news in front of them. He snorted and said, "Look, Du Guangzhong has completely surrendered to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu personally brought him to see Chu Yuanxing. I guess he used this to entice him to stand on Chu Xiu's side." And that idiot actually agreed. Lu Yuqing and Qin Fang also frowned. This time they did not doubt it anymore. They had known Du Guangzhong for more than 10 years. They knew that the person Du Guangzhong admired the most was the former hall master of the Guangzhong torture room, giant hero Chu Kuanga. Now, if Chu Xiu used Chu Yuanxing to make Du Guangzhong surrender, it was also very likely. The crux of the problem was, did Du Guangzhong tell them what they had done? Wu Saiping's expression turned cold. "We can't care so much. If that thing is exposed, we'll all be in trouble." "Then what do you want to do?" Lu Qingli asked. Wu Saiping did not answer him. He just said, "Don't forget we've burned the account books. There's no evidence for that thing." Qin Fang said with a gloomy face, "There's no evidence, but Du Guangzhong is the witness. He knows all the things recorded in the account book. When the time comes, it will be very easy for him to check the records one by one." Warriors had strong spiritual force, so their memory was naturally much better than ordinary people. It was not a problem for them to memorize an account book. In fact, he did the same thing. In order to prevent accidents, he directly memorized the entire account book. Wu Saiping's eyes revealed a trace of killing intent. "The material evidence was burned by us and the witness was killed by us. Then won't there be no evidence?" "Wu Saiping, are you crazy?" Lu Qingli and Qin Fang immediately stood up. Their eyes were filled with horror. Wu Saiping's meaning was very clear. He actually wanted to kill Du Guangzhong. There was internal strife in the Guangzhong torture room. There was competition between the 4 disciplinary officers. There were so many inspectors under Wei Juduan, so naturally there was competition too. They fought for credit, resources and so on. But no matter how internal strife, there was a limit. Killing a colleague was a big taboo in Guangzhou. Even if the Guangzhou torture room's Jianghu constables made a mistake, they had to be escorted to the branch hall or the headquarters in Guangzhou City to be convicted before they could be dealt with. They could not simply kill, not to mention killing a colleague without reason. Wu Siping raised his head and said with a cold expression, "I'm not crazy. This is just the best solution. Don't tell me you don't know how the previous patrol inspector, Fang Jingyuan, died? It's just killing. What's so great about it? We are all Jianghu constables. Is it difficult to set up a perfect murder scene? You two are too timid to do it. Let me do it. I've long disliked that old man Du Guangzhou." After that, Wu Siping turned around and left. Lu Qingli and Qin Fang looked at each other helplessly. They couldn't stop Wu Siping from leaving. In the past, Wu Siping was a Jianghu bandit. A bandit was not a godly thief. One relied on skills while the other relied on violence. In the Jianghu, large groups of bandits robbed traveling merchant caravans. A lone bandit like Wu Siping looked for opportunities to kill and rob. If there was a chance, it was not like he had never done something like exterminating an entire family. Later on, when he was captured by the Guangzhou torture room, his ferocious nature was restrained. But looking at it now, Wu Siping was still the same Wu Siping, crazy and ruthless. On the way back, Du Guangzhou felt a little lost. It was not because of Chu Xiu but because of Chu Yuanxing. When he was young, he saw Chu Kuanga as his idol. He hoped that he could become someone like Chu Kuanga. In his heart, Chu Juxia was a godlike figure. As he grew older, he also knew that in this Jianghu full of interests and killing, it was already a great fortune to have a Chu Kuanga appear. Although this Guangzhou hero, Chu Yuanxing, had inherited Chu Kuanga's legacy, in Du Guangzhou's eyes he was too ordinary. He was so ordinary that he couldn't even see the shadow of Chu Kuanga in Chu Yuanxing. Chu Xiu said beside him, "Why? Are you disappointed that Chu Yuanxing didn't inherit Chu Juxia's legacy?" Du Guangzhou hurriedly said, "I don't have the right to be disappointed." Chu Xiu said lightly, "It's actually very normal. People are different, even if Chu Yuanxing is Chu Juxia's son. There are many people in this Jianghu who need people like Chu Juxia, but there are even more people who don't want to see another Chu Juxia appear. If Chu Yuanxing was like his father, he wouldn't have lived until now, even with the protection of the Guangzhou torture room." Du Guangzhou was a little emotional, but before he could finish, Chu Xiu said, "Constable Du, in fact, you should be worried about yourself now. Previously there was only a rift between you and Wu Siping, but now I'm afraid that it's not just a rift between you. It should be about to break up. I don't know what agreement you have, so I'm also very curious about how Wu Siping will deal with you after you break up." Du Guangzhou's expression suddenly changed. He suddenly said, "What do you mean?" Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Constable Du, think about what you did after you arrived in Guangzhou City." Du Guangzhou was at a loss for a moment. What did he do? He didn't seem to have done anything. Moreover, Chu Xiu didn't try to rope him in or anything along the way. Besides, he had been misunderstood by Wu Siping and the others as being roped in by Chu Xiu. Even if Chu Xiu really tried to rope him in or threaten him, he was prepared to be perfunctory. But the problem was that Chu Xiu also didn't say anything. Seeing Du Guangzhou's expression, Chu Xiu couldn't help but shake his head and said, "Constable Du, you are a little too straightforward, so straightforward that I feel embarrassed to plot against you. You didn't do anything, but in the eyes of Wu Siping and the others, you have done a lot. Once the seeds of suspicion germinate, it will make people think of many things." As soon as Chu Xiu's voice fell, Du Guangzhou's face suddenly turned pale. Du Guangzhou had fallen for the same thing twice. At this time he wanted to cry but had no tears. Chapter 154. Among the 4 Jianghu arresters, Du Guangzhou was the oldest, but in fact he was the most honest one. He was not as ambitious as Wu Siping and slippery as Lu Qingli and Qin Fang. That was why Chu Xiu chose him as the target to sow discord among the 4. The first time what Chu Xiu did only made them quarrel with each other, but they didn't break up. Just like Lu Qingli and Qin Fang, they only suspected Du Guangzhou. But this time Chu Xiu turned their suspicion into fact. Although Chu Xiu and Du Guangzhou didn't do anything in other people's eyes, Du Guangzhou had already surrendered to Chu Xiu, and Chu Xiu had already taken out his reward. When Du Guangzhou returned to the inspector hall of Jianghu City again, what awaited him was definitely to break up with Wu Siping and the others. Du Guangzhou pointed at Chu Xiu, trembling with anger and speechless. Having been a constable in the pugilistic world for so many years, Du Guangzhong had captured countless villains. His methods were cruel and ruthless, but none of them were as sinister as Chu Xiu, easily playing with people's hearts in the palm of his hand. Of course, it was useless for Du Guangzhong to blame himself for falling in the same place twice. What had already happened. Chu Xiu said lightly, Wu Siping is an old man in Guangzhong torture room. He must have friends in the headquarters of Guangzhong City's torture room. This matter can't be hidden from others. Maybe Wu Siping has already received the news now, and I'm thinking about how to deal with you. I don't know Wu Siping, but you should know him well after working with him for so many years. How do you think he will deal with you? Du Guangzhong's face suddenly changed when he heard this. It was because he had worked with Wu Siping for so many years that he knew what kind of person Wu Siping was on Earth. In the Inspector Hall of Jianghu City, most of the low-level arresters had a good impression of Wu Siping. Although he had a strong sense of loyalty in the Jianghu, he was generous and forthright, and was loved by his subordinates. But these were all appearances. Deep down, Wu Siping was still a vicious, crazy, and bloodthirsty bandit. Chu Xiu said in a low voice, So, since Wu Siping and the others think you have surrendered to me, you might as well surrender to me. This isn't a lure or a threat. You have no other choice now. When facing Du Guangzhong, Chu Xiu did not use the great art of extinguishing heaven and earth, extinguishing soul shifting to affect his mind. Firstly, it was because he and Du Guangzhong were both in the physical invulnerability realm. The influence of the art of extinguishing heaven, destroying earth and soul transfer was limited and could only play a supporting role. Moreover, external forces were external forces. Now that he had used the heavens extinguishing earth extinguishing soul shifting technique to affect Du Guangzhong would definitely sense it in the future. If Chu Xiu wanted to use this person, he could not use such a method. Actually, according to Chu Xiu's character, the simplest way would be. Regardless of whether it was the way of the king or the way of the tyrant, the way of killing was always the most energy-efficient way. But this wasn't the Blue Dragon Society, but the Guangzhong torture room. It wasn't that easy to kill people. Moreover, Chu Xiu wanted to control a part of the power of the Guangzhong torture room. If he killed all his subordinates, how could Chu Xiu manage the dozens of cities around Jianghu City by himself? So, in dealing with this matter, killing was just a means, not the goal. Du Guangzhong laughed bitterly. Chu Xiu was right. Surrendering to Chu Xiu was his last choice. After Wu Siping and the others received the news, they would definitely break off relations with him. And if he didn't choose to surrender to Chu Xiu, he probably wouldn't have a good ending either. So, the best choice was to turn the act into reality and surrender to Chu Xiu. However, Du Guangzhong still smiled bitterly. You can surrender to official Chu, but I only hope to keep my life. Chu Xiu said in astonishment, Since you have pledged your allegiance to me, I will naturally protect you. Don't you believe this? Du Guangzhong smiled bitterly. What I did with Wu Siping and the others was too big. I'm afraid you can't accept it, sir. Oh, what did you do? Du Guangzhong seemed to be going all out. He gritted his teeth and said, Ever since the previous inspector, Fang Jingyuan, died, the four of us worked together to keep 40% of the taxes that should have been handed over to the torture chamber. After splitting it evenly, we falsified the accounts. The previous account books have been burned. After saying that, Chu Xiu didn't say anything. He only said plainly, That's all? Du Guangzhong was surprised. Is that not enough? Official Chu, don't you mind? Chu Xiu asked in return, Why should I mind? From Chu Xiu's point of view, this kind of thing couldn't be more normal. The previous boss was dead, and the new boss hadn't arrived yet. Wasn't it normal to take advantage of this time to gain some benefits? Seeing Chu Xiu's attitude, Du Guangzhong suddenly realized that he, Wu Siping, and the others had all thought wrong. The previous inspector, Fang Jingyuan, was upright and even a little stubborn. Therefore, when Fang Jingyuan was in office, they didn't dare to play these little tricks. Moreover, Chu Xiu was recommended to the Guangzhong torture room through his relationship with Chu Yuanxing, the hero of Guangzhong. Therefore, Du Guangzhong and the others subconsciously thought that Chu Xiu would also be like Fang Jingyuan. Naturally, they didn't dare to let Chu Xiu have something on them. If they had known that Chu Xiu had such an attitude, cooperation might have been a good choice. However, Du Guangzhong secretly shook his head. If Chu Xiu had the cultivation of the three-flower realm at one's prominence, cooperation would have been possible. However, with Wu Siping's personality, after seeing that Chu Xiu was only in the physical invulnerability realm, cooperation was no longer possible. However, at this time Chu Xiu was interested. He asked, "Is withholding tax revenue a serious crime?" Du Guangzhong smiled bitterly and said, "It should be said that it's a capital crime. However, there are still people in the Guangzhong torture room who do this." "What?" Du Guangzhong said, "Because the salary given to us by the higher-ups is too low. Now, the salary of the Guangzhong torture room has not changed for decades. It was set when Chu Kuanga was still here. However, that was then and this is now. When Chu Kuanga was still here, the Guangzhong torture room was not as strong as it is now. For example, at that time, an inspector could be a martial artist in the physical invulnerability realm, but now one has to be in the three-flower realm at one's prominence. Of course, you, official Chu, are an exception. Decades of salary was enough for the cultivation resources of a martial artist in the physical invulnerability realm, but now it was given to experts in the three-flower realm at one's prominence or even the five Qis in the origin realm. Therefore, almost everyone in the Guangzhong torture room salary was on the low side, so some people had the idea of withholding tax revenue. This could be considered an unspoken rule in the Guangzhong torture room, but no one dared to reveal it. There were also some inspectors who had their own sources of income. In any case, they definitely wouldn't starve. It's just that the original Lord Fang of our hall is too stubborn. He doesn't allow this or that. This has led to the strength of our Jianghu city's hall being the weakest among all the patrol halls in Guanxi. Chu Xiu touched his chin. Sure enough, rumors were just rumors. It was impossible for there to be no conflicts and unspoken rules in a large force like the Guangzhong torture room. As for why Guanxiu, a hall master who led the Guangzhong torture room to its peak, did not raise the salary of all the martial artists in the Guangzhong torture room, Chu Xiu could guess it with a little thought. It was not because she was stingy, but because this was a rule set by Chu Kuanga. Chu Kuanga's influence on the Guangzhong torture room was too great, so great that Guanxiu had to worry about her reputation. Such a small matter was definitely different in the eyes of the Guangzhong torture room's own people and outsiders. In the eyes of the Guangzhong torture room's own people, it should be a good thing that their salary had not been increased for decades. Almost no one would object to it. However, in the eyes of outsiders, if Guanxiu increased the salary of all the martial artists in the Guangzhong torture room, it was somewhat to buy people's hearts. In the past, Chu Juxia relied on his personal charm to build such a solid foundation and influence for the Guangzhong torture room. In the end, Guanxiu only relied on money to win people's hearts. Moreover, this also gave people a feeling that Guanxiu hinted that Chu Kuanga was stingy in the past. Gossip was a fearful thing, so this matter had been dragged on until now. Perhaps it would be dragged on until the next hall master, when the Guangzhong torture room had completely erased all traces of Chu Kuanga. Of course, these were not things that Chu Xiu needed to worry about. The inspector hall should have resolved the matter. By the time Chu Xiu and Du Guangzhong returned to the inspector hall, Wu Siping and the other two were already there. Seeing that Chu Xiu and Du Guangzhong had returned, Wu Siping's face did not show any murderous intent. He only chuckled and said, "Sir, you're back? Old Du has been gone for so long. There are many things that need to be dealt with." Chu Xiu said indifferently, "There's no hurry to deal with these matters. It just so happens that I have something to tell you. Follow me to the meeting hall." Wu Siping secretly glanced at the expressionless Du Guangzhong and sneered in his heart. Did this new sir think that he could control them just because he had Du Guangzhong's support? Naive. After entering the meeting hall, everyone took their seats. Chu Xiu said, "Constable Du, close the door." Du Guangzhong obediently closed the door, but Wu Siping and the other two felt that something was wrong. Wu Siping frowned, stood up and said, "Sir, what do you mean by closing the door in broad daylight?" Chu Xiu played with the handle of the red sleeve knife in his hand and said indifferently, "Of course I'm going to say something that can't be known by outsiders. For example, the things that you did after the death of the previous inspector." As soon as he said this, Wu Siping and the other two looked at Du Guangzhong together with a glaring murderous intent in their eyes. This traitor, he actually told this matter to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu pressed his hand down and said, "Why are you so agitated? I didn't say that I was going to report this matter." As soon as he said this, Wu Siping and the others were stunned. Could it be that they had misjudged Chu Xiu's character from the beginning? Chapter 155. The previous inspector, Fang Jingyuan, had left a deep impression on everyone. In addition, because Chu Xiu was recommended by Chu Yuanxing, Wu Siping and the others like Du Guangzhong thought that Chu Xiu was someone like Fang Jingyuan. However, after hearing Chu Xiu's words, it seemed that they were wrong. Could Chu Xiu tolerate them withholding the taxes? Wu Siping laughed and said, Why didn't official Chu say so earlier? You made us nervous for such a long time. There was no way to probe this kind of thing and they didn't dare to do so. If Chu Xiu was really someone like Fang Jingyuan, wouldn't they be giving themselves away? However, now that Chu Xiu had expressed his attitude, Wu Saiping and the other two heaved a sigh of relief. However, at this time Chu Xiu was staring at Wu Saiping, who was laughing loudly. He said calmly, "Is it funny?" Wu Saiping stopped smiling and frowned. "Official Chu, what do you mean?" Although Chu Xiu had expressed his attitude just now, Wu Saiping still didn't have much respect for Chu Xiu. They were both in the physical invulnerability realm. In his early years he was also a ferocious solo thief. After being subdued into the Guanzhong torture room, he was also the best Jianghu constable in the Jianzhou Inspector Hall. He didn't think that he was inferior to Chu Xiu. If he had to say that he was inferior, he could only say that he was inferior because of luck. Of course, if Wu Saiping received the detailed information about Chu Xiu from his good friend, his attitude would probably change. But it was a pity that it was already too late. Chu Xiu looked at Wu Saiping and said coldly, "What do you mean?" "It's simple. I can tolerate you withholding the taxes, but I can't tolerate you being disrespectful to me. This is the Guanzhong torture room, not the Jianghu where you can do whatever you want. After staying in the Guanzhong torture room for so many years, haven't you learned how to respect your superiors?" Before Wu Saiping could say anything, the red sleeve knife in Chu Xiu's hand had been unsheathed. In an instant, the blood-refining god gang, which was more than 10 feet long, was slashed out. This knife shone brightly in the conference hall. The ferocious killing intent and evil qi slashed at Wu Saiping, which made Lu Qingli and Qin Fang dodge subconsciously. They all looked at Chu Xiu in horror. This was the first time they had seen Chu Xiu make a move, but no one had expected that the young man's strength would actually be to such an extent. They could not recognize such a powerful aura, but they could feel the dense pressure on the blood-refined divine aura. If it was any one of them, it would be extremely strenuous for them to receive the power of the blade. Wu Saiping's strength was stronger than the three people present. After all, he was a lone thief who could fight against several warriors of the Guanzhong torture room at the same level. In the end, the Guanzhong torture room even sent an expert who had condensed the 3 flowers above the head to capture him. The blood-refined deity shield did indeed make him feel an extremely heavy pressure. However, he immediately extended his hand and an icy blue precious weapon long saber appeared in his hand. The long saber swept out and the sharp edge danced. Saber astral energy gushed out like the wind, colliding head-on with Chu Xiu's blood-refined deity shield, causing a series of explosions. What Wu Saiping was good at was also the fast knife technique. It was as fast as the wind and as explosive as fire. It was a pity that under Chu Xiu's blood-refining god gang, he could no longer display his fast and fierce knife momentum. Chu Xiu's attack this time was to establish his prestige. How could he give Wu Saiping a chance? The moment Wu Saiping blocked the blood-refining god gang with great difficulty, Chu Xiu's figure had already moved. In the blink of an eye he appeared in front of Wu Saiping. He formed a seal with both hands, and a bright golden gang chi suddenly burst out. Lin character formula, Great Vajra seal. Among the 9 words formulas, Chu Xiu hadn't fully mastered them. However, now Chu Xiu could use 4 or 5 of them skillfully. Among them, the Great Vajra seal, which was the most powerful and explosive, was also often used by Chu Xiu. Now it was close to the point of perfection. The seal that was blooming with golden gang chi suddenly fell. Vajra suppresses the world, slays demons. Chu Xiu didn't have the compassion of the Buddhist sect, but Chu Xiu had some understanding of the fury of the Vajra. In the Buddhist sect's seal, there was actually a tyrannical and destructive aura. With a loud bang the gang chi exploded. Among the debris were the fragments of weapons. The great Vajra seal that Chu Xiu had used all his strength directly shattered the long knife in Wu Saiping's hand. It even sent his whole body flying and blood immediately spurted out. Chu Xiu took a step forward and without any hesitation he sent out another palm strike. The heaven-extinguishing earth-annihilating palm of the great violet sun was unleashed, and the powerful palm force brought with it an incomparably evil demonic flames of the purple sun, smashing into Wu Saiping's body. The scorching power caused him to spit out a mouthful of blood. Each of the 3 attacks was extremely fierce and explosive. It was like a crushing force and it made Chu Xiu look like a god or a demon. It was incomparably terrifying. At this moment Wu Saiping couldn't care less about being shocked. He only wanted to save his life. Taking the great Vajra seal head-on had already injured his internal organs. The purple sun demonic flame of the great purple sun hand was still burning his meridians. If he didn't escape, he would definitely die at the hands of Chu Xiu. Wu Siping formed a seal with both hands and spat out a mouthful of blood essence. His gang qi was released, and it actually fused with the blood to condense a huge knife that was 10 feet long. With a whistling wind, it slashed at Chu Xiu. Splitting wind slash. Wu Siping's body was the knife, and his gang qi was the sharp edge. He didn't have a knife in his hand, but the power of this slash was even more terrifying than when he held the knife in his hand. After this slash, Wu Siping's figure didn't stop at all. He directly fled in the direction of the door. The red sleeve knife was held in Chu Xiu's hand. Wisps of black mist wrapped around the knife, and also lingered in Chu Xiu's eyes. A Vici demon knife, Hell's Gate opens. With the terrifying hatred and murderous intent of the endless hell, the knife came crashing down. Wu Siping's seemingly powerful splitting wind slash was extremely fragile and directly smashed into pieces. Just when Wu Siping felt the evil and terrifying power, but before he could turn his head, the pitch-black gang qi had already slashed across his neck. In an instant, his head was separated from his body, but the strange thing was that there was no blood flowing out of the wound. Dong! With a soft sound, Wu Siping's head fell to the ground. Instantly, Lu Qingli and Qin Fang's faces turned pale. At this moment, they finally understood why Chu Xiu could become a patrol with the strength of a physical invulnerability expert. Although Chu Yuanxing's recommendation was important, what was more important was that Chu Xiu had the strength to do so. In the Jianghu City Patrol Hall, Wu Siping's strength was almost the strongest, and he was also the one with the most abundant battle experience. However, when facing Chu Xiu, he didn't even have the strength to fight back. More importantly, Chu Xiu's unscrupulous attitude also terrified them. Previously, Wu Siping had already revealed his killing intent towards Du Guangzhong. However, Wu Siping had yet to make a move. Even if he were to make a move, he could only scheme in secret and create some accidents. It was impossible for him to be like Chu Xiu, who had slaughtered a constable in the patrol hall like he was slaughtering a chicken. Now that Wu Siping was dead, what about the two of them? Previously, the two of them were also the ones who disrespected Chu Xiu. Moreover, even if there wasn't such a thing, Chu Xiu would still kill them to keep their mouths shut. Feeling Chu Xiu's gaze, Lu Qingli and Qin Fang suddenly shivered. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu took out an account book and said lightly, "This is the account book of your previous division of loot. You've already burned it." This one was written by Arrestor Du. Lu Qingli and Qin Fang looked at Chu Xiu with puzzlement, not understanding what Chu Xiu meant. As a result, Chu Xiu's gang qi burst out and tore the account book into pieces in a flash. Humans die for wealth, birds die for food. Why do we warriors join the Guangzhong torture room? It's too hypocritical to say that it's to protect the order in Guangzhong and the safety of the people. What we seek are nothing but two things: power and benefits. The salary of the Guangzhong torture room is too little, so we have to find a way ourselves. It's not a shameful thing, but... Chu Xiu's gaze looked straight at the two of them, and his voice was deep as if it directly penetrated into their hearts. But, power and benefits can only be given by me. You can't steal or rob behind my back. Lu Qingli and Qin Fang weren't idiots. As soon as they heard what Chu Xiu said, they immediately understood Chu Xiu's meaning. If they chose to surrender, Chu Xiu could give them power and benefits. Of course, apart from this, they had no other choice. Just look at Wu Siping, who couldn't be more dead. This was a lesson to be learned from the mistakes of others. So Lu Qingli and Qin Fang directly knelt down on one knee and said in a deep voice, "Greetings, Your Excellency." They were not bowing to Chu Xiu's identity as a patrol envoy, but to Chu Xiu himself. This was also a form of submission. Of course, it was submission under great pressure. Of course, it didn't matter whether they surrendered sincerely or were forced to surrender under threat. Chu Xiu only wanted the result, not the process. Chu Xiu said faintly, "All right, all of you get up. The four of you have secretly withheld 40% of the tax and are still acting so nervous. Isn't this a little too shameful? Don't worry, in the future, you will definitely be able to obtain more than what you have now." Just like what Chu Xiu had said, he had racked his brains to join the Guangzhong Torture Hall not to protect the order of the Guangzhong Torture Hall, but to seek wealth and power. These were the only two things he wanted. With the identity and power of the inspector, if Chu Xiu could only play such a low-level trick like intercepting the tax, he would be too useless. At this time, Du Guangzhong looked at Wu Siping's corpse on the ground and said, "Your Excellency, how should we deal with Wu Siping? Killing a colleague is a big taboo in the Guangzhong torture room. Without a proper reason, this matter will be very troublesome." Chu Xiu waved his hand casually and said, "Reason? People are troublesome when they are alive, but it's much simpler when they are dead. Arrestor Wu Siping was accidentally killed when he was chasing a criminal and died in the line of duty. Is this reason enough? You are all experienced arresters in Jianghu. It should be very easy for you to fake the scene. Chapter 156. Chu Xiu's method was simple and crude, which made Du Guangzhong dumbfounded. However, when he thought about it carefully, he realized that it was indeed the case. The death of a Jianghu constable wasn't a big deal. As long as no one disclosed it, the higher-ups wouldn't investigate it. Chu Xiu's immediate superior was Wei Jueduan. Would Wei Jueduan investigate the death of an ordinary Jianghu constable? Wouldn't he be busy to death? As long as the reason and evidence were sufficient, it was fine to report it without arousing suspicion. Du Guangzhong hesitated, and Wu Siping's subordinates? Kill them all. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said lightly. What? Du Guangzhong doubted his hearing. Your Excellency, Wu Siping had dozens of subordinates. Kill them all? Lu Qingli and Qin Fang also looked at Chu Xiu in bewilderment. Killing dozens of people in one breath, what was Chu Xiu going to do? Was he going to break up the whole inspector hall? Chu Xiu said lightly, Constable Du, you told me about Wu Siping's background. He was originally a Jianghu bandit. His Jianghu temperament was too heavy. He was different from you Jianghu constables who were trained in the Guangzhong torture room. You used the rules of the Guangzhong torture room to restrain your subordinates, while he relied on the so-called Jianghu Code of Brotherhood. Although you don't like it, I have to say that his subordinates are far more loyal than yours. Moreover, none of Wu Siping's subordinates came from the Guangzhong torture room. Almost all of them were born in the Jianghu. They were blinded by the so-called Brotherhood, so it's hard to say what they would do. Wu Siping is already dead. I don't want to cause any trouble because of a dead man. Du Guangzhong and the other two didn't look good. In fact, it was true. The loyalty of their subordinates could only be said to be ordinary. In the past, they didn't like Wu Siping's Jianghu habits, but the loyalty of Wu Siping's subordinates was much stronger than theirs. I'll leave this matter to you three. I only want the result. Chu Xiu ordered. Lu Qingli asked in surprise, Us? Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, If it wasn't you, could it be me? If I do everything myself, what's the use of you guys then? Lu Qingli and the other two looked at each other and smiled bitterly. They knew what this meant. This was their proof of allegiance to Chu Xiu. If they killed the people on Wu Siping's side, they would also have something that could be used against them by Chu Xiu. They could not find a reason to betray him, nor did they want to. Therefore, the three of them could only cup their hands and leave with Wu Siping's corpse. The Jianzhou City Patrol Hall had jurisdiction over more than 10 small cities around it. They were not too far away. The furthest place could be reached in 2 or 3 days on horseback. Moreover, this time they had decided to submit to Chu Xiu, so they had to show their sincerity. Therefore, they gathered all the Jianghu constables under them and gathered them in a rundown temple outside the city under Wu Siping's name. They said that there was a mission for them. At this time, in the rundown temple outside Jianzhou City, more than 50 Jianghu constables were gathered. They all looked puzzled. Since the death of the previous patrol Fang Jinyuan, they hadn't made such a big move in a long time. Could it be that the new patrol was up to something? One of the warriors asked a bald warrior beside him, Brother Sun, what is Lord Wu planning to do by gathering us here? Is something big going to happen? You are always by Lord Wu's side. You should know the news. The bald warrior touched his bald head and said doubtfully, I don't know either. After the new patrol called Lord Wu and the others to the meeting hall, he acted mysteriously and gathered everyone together. I don't know what he's up to. However, you don't have to worry. The new patrol is only in the physical invulnerability realm. He got in because of his connections. What right does he have to be above Lord Wu? In the future, the patrol hall will still respect Lord Wu. While everyone was discussing, Du Guangzhong and the other two walked into the rundown temple. Du Guangzhong's personality was a little awkward to do such things, so he let Lu Qingli do it. Lu Qingli had been in the Guangzhong torture room for more than 20 years. His seniority was second only to Du Guangzhong. However, unlike Du Guangzhong, who was more old-fashioned and rigid, Lu Qingli was short and fat. He always had a smiling expression on his face and looked harmless. He usually spoke in a friendly manner, so the ordinary constables and bailiffs didn't really fear him. Seeing Lu Qingli, the bald warrior under Wu Siping asked curiously, Lord Lu, where is Lord Wu? Lu Qingli smiled and said, Don't worry, I'll send you to see Lord Wu. The people under Wu Siping didn't react. but the bald warrior felt that something was wrong. What did he mean by sending them to see Lord Wu? However, before he could object, Lu Qingli waved his hand with a smile on his face and said softly, "Kill." As soon as he finished speaking, the sound of bowstrings exploding could be heard from outside the dilapidated temple. Dozens of huge crossbow bolts as thick as an arm were shot at the same time, directly penetrating the wall and immediately killing half of the warriors under Wu Saiping. After a round of crossbow bolts, more than 30 Jianghu constables, the weakest of whom was in the Xiantian stage, rushed into the rundown temple and started a massacre with Lu Qingli and the other two. After all, Wu Saiping had more than 50 people under him. Although Lu Qingli and the others were physical invulnerability experts, they couldn't kill them all in a short time. It would be troublesome if even one of them escaped. Therefore, they also brought their trusted subordinates to attack. Although there weren't many of them, they were all powerful and reliable confidants. Moreover, Lu Qingli had slyly ordered the others to use the siege-breaking crossbow to ambush and kill half of the enemy. This kind of siege-breaking crossbow was used by armies to attack cities. There were many of them in the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall, but they were used to apprehend martial artists who cultivated their bodies. Ordinary Xiantian martial artists would have to expend a great deal of effort to defend against them. Those below the Xiantian realm would have no choice but to dodge. In the midst of the massacre, the warriors under Wu Saiping were still in a state of confusion. They couldn't understand why their comrades would suddenly kill them. Where was their lord? Unfortunately, under such a crushing situation, they didn't even have time to think. In less than 15 minutes they were all slaughtered. Shaking off the blood on his saber, Lu Qingli put his palms together and bowed to the corpses on the ground. He said in a low voice, "Everyone, I'm not the one who wants you dead. Even if you become evil spirits, don't look for me in the middle of the night. That official Chu has a murderous aura around him. I reckon he has killed a lot of people. You guys go look for him." Qin Fang couldn't stand Lu Qingli's attitude. He couldn't help but frown and said, "Old Lu, what's the use of acting like this? If you want to kill people, then kill them. If you're really afraid that they'll become evil spirits and come looking for you, why don't you go and do good deeds?" Lu Qingli glanced at him and said, "What do you know? This is a method I learned from the Bodhi Zen monastery's Zen preaching. Do you know what karma is? Do you know what inner demons are?" Qin Fang curled his lips in disdain and said, "Bullsh*t. Those monks have killed a lot of people themselves. What's the use of these fake things? Don't waste time. Burn the corpses and deal with them." They were all experienced constables in Jianghu. What they were best at was investigating all kinds of traces of fighting. This time they could fake the scene, but it would be too much effort. Anyway, with Lord Chuxiu taking the blame, they could just push all the blame onto some villains and thieves. They could just say that these warriors died in the line of duty and were cremated and buried. When the higher-ups investigated, there wouldn't be any evidence at all. It was very simple. After dealing with these corpses, the three of them directly brought their men back to the Jian Province's Inspector Hall. They gathered everyone together and formally paid their respects to Lord Chuxiu. In fact, this step should have been done when Chuxiu took office. According to the rules, the four of them should have brought all their men to pay their respects to Chuxiu. Otherwise, as an inspector, wouldn't it be a joke if he didn't know his men? But at that time, Wu Saiping had already decided to make Chuxiu a mere figurehead, so this scene was naturally avoided. Now, it should be regarded as the first step for Chuxiu to establish his own prestige in the Jian Province's Inspector Hall. At this time, in the martial arts field in the backyard of the Inspector Hall, nearly 200 constables and constables of the Jian Province's Inspector Hall gathered here, waiting for Chuxiu's instructions. As long as one wasn't too stupid, he should be clear about the atmosphere in the Inspector Hall. The new inspector took office, but they weren't allowed to pay their respects. The attitude of the several lords was already obvious. And how long had it been? In less than half a month, they were called by their lords to pay their respects to the new inspector. This attitude naturally explained everything. The new lord's methods were very sharp. It only took him such a long time to make Wu Saiping and the others completely submit. However, they were still a little puzzled. Why didn't Wu Si and the others' men come? Only the warriors who participated in the battle against Wu Saiping's men remained silent and kept a low profile. After a while, Du Guangzhong and the other two followed behind Chuxiu to the martial arts field. They stood in front of everyone and bowed to Chuxiu. "Greetings, Lord." The rest of the Inspector Hall's constables also bowed to Chuxiu in unison. "Greetings, Lord." Looking at everyone present, Chuxiu nodded and said, "There are 5 inspectors under the Guanxi region. Ever since the previous inspector, Lord Fong, died in the line of duty, the Jian province's inspector hall has become the weakest among all the inspectors. However, life and death are decreed by fate. The strength of the Jian province's inspector hall doesn't depend on me but on you. In the past you didn't have a chance to fight, but now I'm giving you this chance. Chapter 157. Chu Xiu's provocative words did not resonate too much with the warriors present. Other than Du Guangzhong and a few of his trusted subordinates who were more active, the rest of the warriors were not too excited. Those who were able to work in the Guangzhong torture room were people who had seen the world. They would not be easily incited. In other words, these people were also very realistic. Those who were capable would study and climb up, while those who were incapable could only see the benefits in front of them. Right now, Chu Xiu had just taken office, and they had not seen any benefits at all. It was obviously impossible for them to serve him with just these words. Of course, Chu Xiu did not care. He only continued, "There is one more thing to report to everyone. When Constable Wu Saiping and his subordinates were hunting down the old demon of the Yin Mountain, Du Gufang, who was wanted in the Guangzhong Pass, they were brutally killed by this demon. His subordinates were also slaughtered by this demon and died in the line of duty. I have already had them buried properly. The Guangzhong torture room has also done its best to protect the safety of the Guangzhong Pass over the years. However, your life is your own, so you must be more careful when you carry out missions in the future." As soon as these words came out, the expressions of everyone present changed. Some of the smarter ones seemed to have already figured out what was going on. The old demon of the Yin Mountain, Du Gufang, was an expert who had stepped into the realm of Three Flower at one's prominence. He was indeed capable of slaughtering Wu Saiping and the others. However, the problem was that Wu Saiping did not seem like the kind of person who would risk his life to capture such a demon. Moreover, they did not seem to have heard of Wu Saiping taking people out during this period of time. When he thought about it in this way, the reason behind it was obvious. Everyone's hearts turned cold at the same time. Putting aside the ability of this new lord, his actions were ruthless enough. Alright, this matter ends here. Everyone disperse and continue patrolling. Constables Du Guangzhong, Lu Qingli and Qin Fang will be in charge of Wu Saiping's territory. Hearing this, the bailiffs and constables replied loudly, "Yes, sir." This time their aura was much stronger than before. Since Wu Saiping's subordinates had so many empty places, they naturally had to continue to manage them. In this way, the authority in their hands would also be greater than before. Only when they saw the benefits would they be motivated, right? After everyone left, Chu Xiu called Du Guangzhong and the other two to the study room. After the three of them were seated, Chu Xiu asked, "The morale of the constables and constables at Jian Province's patrol hall doesn't seem to be very high." Lu Qingli smiled bitterly. "Sir, our Guanxi region has a total of 6 inspectors, but our Jianzhou inspector hall is the weakest. Our income is also the lowest. Of course, our subordinates have no morale." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and asked, "Is it because of the previous inspector?" Lu Qingli nodded. "More or less. There are 2 main reasons. Firstly, Jian Province's area isn't that big. The other stronger inspectors are even in charge of 2 prefectures at the same time. Furthermore, the previous patrol inspector, Lord Fong, was a little too upright and plain-spoken. His subordinates only received a little salary, but they didn't receive any other benefits. Yet, he always sent his subordinates out to carry out missions to capture those villains that weren't to be trifled with. Although this is the duty of the Guangzhong torture room, we have to at least act according to our capabilities, don't we? Every time we take action we suffer heavy losses. In the end, even if we manage to capture someone, the rewards given by the higher-ups are pitifully small. Sir Fong isn't greedy. He gives all the rewards to the brothers under him, but that little bit of money isn't even enough to fill the gaps between a few hundred people." Lu Qingli's tone was filled with resentment. Obstructing one's path to wealth was akin to killing one's parents. Although the previous inspector, Fang Jingyuan, was their superior, they still hated him to the core. Looking at the people from the other inspector's hall eating the meat, while they didn't even get to drink the soup, of course they weren't happy. Chu Xiu agreed with Lu Qingli's words. People's hearts were different. If you wanted to be a saint, but you didn't consider the benefits of your subordinates and wanted them to be saints, you naturally wouldn't be popular. In the past, when Chu Kuanga commanded the Guangzhong torture room, he relied on his personal charisma. He took the lead in everything and the others were willing to follow him. Meanwhile, Guan Xiu commanded the Guangzhong torture room because of his power. Even though Guan Xiu was impartial and merciless, and even gave the warriors in the Guanzhong torture room very little salary. He was the one who turned the Guanzhong torture room, which could only survive in the cracks, into a military organization that was recognized by the three countries. Moreover, Guan Xiyu wasn't greedy for power. The 4 disciplinary officers, numerous inspectors, and the disciplinary bureau's secret agents all possessed extremely shocking power. So, they were naturally willing to pledge loyalty to Guan Xiyu. As for Chu Xiu, the former Fang Jingyuan, his personal charisma was naturally not as good as Chu Kuang's, and his ability was not as good as Guan Xiyu's. However, he wanted to learn from these 2 outstanding people. Even though he had no qualms about it, his subordinates still complained. At this time, Qin Fang suddenly said, "Now there is another reason why the morale of our Jianzhou Inspector Hall is low. That is, in the small cities around the Jianzhou Prefecture, there is not much power left in our Inspector Hall. The local martial arts forces don't take us seriously. The one who caused this was that Lord Fang. He was the one who wanted to die and now he's played himself to death." Du Guangzhong frowned and said, "Old Qin, don't talk nonsense. It was the sentencing officer who personally sent people to investigate how Lord Fang died. The matter has been settled. It was just an accident." At this time, Chu Xiu suddenly became interested. He directly said to Qin Fang, "Tell me. It doesn't matter. We are all on the same side. Is there any secret about the death of the previous inspector Fang Jingyuan?" Logically speaking, the Guanzhong torture room was the ruler of the entire Guanzhong area. Although the Guanzhong area was a mix of good people and bad people, no matter how arrogant you were, you would still be under the jurisdiction of the Guanzhong torture room. However, now Qin Fang said that the Jianzhou Inspector Hall had no power in the entire Jianzhou Prefecture. This was very strange. Moreover, there was nothing suspicious about the death of the previous inspector, Fang Jingyuan. He was killed by Han Rang, the blood emptiness sword, while he was hunting down a 3-flower realm criminal at one's prominence. Of course, this was certainly not like how Chu Xiu killed Wu Saiping. He only secretly gave Fang Jingyuan a reasonable death. Fang Jingyuan attacked in a small city and was killed in front of hundreds of warriors. There was nothing suspicious about it. However, now that Qin Fang said it, could there be an inside story? Qin Fang coughed and said, "Official Chu, since I've already pledged my allegiance to you, there's no point in hiding these things from you. The previous patrol inspector, Fang Jingyuan, was indeed killed in front of everyone. To an outsider there was nothing strange about it. However, we have followed Fang Jingyuan for many years, and we have a good understanding of his strength. Master Fang's strength can definitely be ranked at the top among the warriors in the realm of 3-flower at one's prominence. As for Han Rang, to put it bluntly, he was just a coward. Usually he only dared to rob and kill some small merchants in Guangzhou. He didn't even dare to touch the bigger ones. The reason why he was able to become famous was because of the 5th transformation precious weapon, the blood emptiness sword, in his hand. It has the effect of transforming blood qi. If there was enough blood qi, the blood emptiness sword could even be upgraded to a 6th transformation precious weapon. We saw that battle with our own eyes. In the beginning, Master Fang was able to suppress his opponent with just a few moves. However, later on, Master Fang's strength suddenly fell to the extreme, not even reaching the innate realm. In the end, he was killed by Han Rang with a sword. Chu Xiu rubbed his chin and said, "If that's the case, it's not really suspicious. There are all kinds of strange things in Jianghu. Maybe Han Rang used some kind of method to sneak attack Fang Jingyuan and kill him." Qin Fang shook his head and said, "There have been many suspicious points in this matter from the beginning. Han Rang is as timid as a mouse. Before Lord Fang chased after him, he just happened to rob and kill a group of merchants outside a small city in the Jianzhou Prefecture. According to his character, after committing a crime, he would immediately flee far away, but this time he took the initiative to show himself in front of us. Moreover, when Han Rang showed up, we happened to be at the Jiang family's banquet. After we parted on bad terms, Han Rang seemed to have received the news in advance and deliberately appeared in front of us, attracting Master Fang to attack him. In the end he was killed. This is the suspicious point." Qin Fang frowned and asked, "Wait, who is this Jiang family? Why is it related to Fang Jingyuan?" Chu Xiu asked with a frown. Qin Fang said, "The Jiang family is one of the major powers in the Jianzhou Prefecture. They have a long history, almost as long as the time when the Guanzhong torture room was established. Master Fang also knows that the Guanzhong area is the center of trade between the 3 countries. There are countless caravans coming and going, but there are some prohibited items that are clearly prohibited from being traded to prevent them from entering the other country. However, although there are clear prohibitions in the torture room, there are still some people who refuse to mend their ways. Among them, the most serious are some of the local martial arts powers in the Guangzhou area. For example, they buy some prohibited items from northern Yen and sell them to eastern Qi or western Chu. Simply put, it's smuggling. Once this kind of behavior is discovered by the Guangzhou torture room, it will definitely be investigated. At that time, Master Fang suspected that the Jiang family was secretly smuggling these prohibited items, so he questioned the Jiang family. However, the Jiang family refused to admit it, so we didn't find anything. When Master Fang came to the Jiang family for the second time, the Jiang family prepared to bribe Master Fang. However, Master Fang refused and fell out with the Jiang family, saying that he would bring Master Fang back to the torture room to be interrogated and so on. They parted on bad terms on the spot. Official Chu, you also know what happened after that. Master Fang was killed, and the investigation of the Jiang family's smuggling was also left unsettled. Because of this, the Jianzhou Patrol Hall's prestige in the Jianzhou Prefecture's martial arts world was greatly reduced, causing people to think that the Jianzhou Patrol Hall's work is all bark and no bite. Chapter 158. Qin Fang told him what had happened. Chu Xiu immediately felt that something was wrong because everything was too coincidental. Fang Jingyuan had just said that he wanted to investigate the Jiang family, but he was killed in the blink of an eye. Chu Xiu would never believe that there was nothing fishy about this. Since Chu Xiu could easily see through it, the other martial arts forces in the Jianzhou Prefecture should also be able to see through it. That was why they felt that the Jianzhou Prefecture Inspector Hall was just SOSO. It was all bark and no bite. Not only could they not find anything, but a dignified inspector had lost his life here. Chu Xiu frowned and said, "Since there are so many suspicious points, why didn't the higher-ups send someone to investigate?" Qin Fang smiled bitterly and said, "Of course they sent someone to investigate, but it was not Lord Wei Juduan personally. It was just a Jianghu constable sent by the Guanxi Torture Hall branch to investigate. They didn't investigate the Jiang family, but only Lord Fang's injuries. They didn't find anything unusual. In fact, although we found something wrong, we didn't find anything unusual." Chu Xiu knocked on the table and said, "The Jiang family is such a big suspect, but they didn't investigate them. What's going on? Are the Jianghu constables sent by the higher-ups inferior to you?" Qin Fang coughed and said, "During the penal officer's birthday, the Jiang family once presented a jade Buddha statue. It was made of the heart-clearing warm jade, a specialty of the Chu land. It was extremely precious and could help a martial artist to quickly calm down during seclusion. The penal officer liked it very much, so he specially ordered us not to investigate the Jiang family before we have absolute evidence, lest we make a big fuss." A strange look appeared in Chu Xiu's eyes. This was blatant bribery. He seemed to have some understanding of his immediate superior's character. Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "Has the penal officer's character always been like this?" At this moment, Du Guangzhong sighed and said, "Of course not. In the past, when Lord Chu Kuanga was around, the disciplinary officer wouldn't do this. Later, when Lord Guan Xiu became the hall master, orders were strictly enforced. The disciplinary officer didn't dare to do this. It was just that in recent years the disciplinary officer was getting on in years and was about to retire, so he had to find a way out for himself. That was why he had amassed so much wealth. When Lord Fang Jingyuan was the patrol inspector, he was a little too stiff. Not only did he not give any benefits to the disciplinary officer, he even gave some worthless calligraphy and paintings to the disciplinary officer for his birthday. He had long lost the disciplinary officer's favor. Wei Hanshan, the inspector of the Shang Prefecture, which is right next to the Jian Prefecture, is now in charge of not only the Shang Prefecture but also the Qin Prefecture because he knows how to please the disciplinary officer. He is equivalent to the inspector of these two places. Furthermore, this time, it was you who was sent by the higher-ups to be the Jian Prefecture's patrol envoy. If you hadn't come, I heard that Wei Hanshan would still be collecting treasures and preparing to persuade the disciplinary officer to let him manage the Jian Prefecture's affairs as well." Chu Xiu thought about it. He seemed to have some impression of Wei Hanshan. He was very arrogant and obviously did not put him, the new patrol inspector, in his eyes. His attitude was not good. However, from the looks of it, it was probably because Chu Xiu was in his way. The disciplinary officer has gone overboard. Isn't the main hall going to do something about it? Du Guangzhong gritted his teeth and said, "Official Chu, these words are actually a little taboo, but it doesn't matter now. In the early years, when Lord Guanxiu had just taken control of the Guanzhong torture room, the entire Guanzhong torture room was absolutely strict. No one dared to make a mistake. In recent years, although the Guanzhong torture room has become more and more powerful, Lord Guanxiu has been a little slack. His superiors follow suit. Even the main hall is like this, not to mention the subordinates. All of this is because of that woman. Ever since Lord Guanxiu married that woman, his actions have become more and more incomprehensible. Femme fatale, Lord Guan is no longer the Lord Guan of the past. Du Guangzhong's tone carried some resentment. He was a veteran of the Guanzhong torture room. He had experienced the era of Chu Kuanga and the early days of the Guanzhong torture room's rise. He missed that period of time very much. But now the Guanzhong torture room had changed. It had changed so much that he didn't even recognize it. He himself had also changed. Even he who didn't dare to be greedy, had conspired with Wu Siping to withhold the tax revenue under the bewitchment of Wu Siping. Lu Qingli, who was at the side, shouted in a low voice, "Old Du, are you crazy? You dare to say anything? If you say this outside, you won't be the only one in trouble. You'll even implicate us." Du Guangzhong said lightly, "I've wanted to say this for a long time, but I'm not an idiot. Of course I won't say this outside." Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "Don't worry about it. We're all on the same side now. Of course I won't say it outside." As he said this, Chu Xiu couldn't help but think of Guanxiu's wife, Mei Qinglian. That extremely seductive woman. However, Chu Xiu had seen Guanxiu before. She was decisive and had a clear mind. Just from the way she talked and behaved, this chief of the Guanzhong torture room wasn't an idiot who would be bewitched by a woman. Chu Xiu wasn't interested in the secrets of important figures for the time being. He only said to Du Guangzhong and the other two, "Come with me to the Jiang family tomorrow." Du Guangzhong said in surprise, "Official Chu wants to investigate the death of De Guangzhong?" Chu Xiu said lightly, "I have nothing to do with Fang Jingyuan. Why would I investigate that? Moreover, this matter has already been decided by the disciplinary officer. Even if I find evidence and go to the disciplinary officer to reverse the verdict, it will only be a slap to the disciplinary officer's face. However, the one who started the trouble had to be the one who started it. Since the Jianzhou Patrol Hall suffered a loss at the hands of the Jiang family, we naturally have to get it back from the Jiang family. Moreover, our patrol hall also needs some new sources of income. Not to mention the danger of being blackmailed by others, we won't be able to get much money. It's not worth it." Du Guangzhong and the other two looked at each other and didn't say anything. Now that they had expressed their allegiance to Chu Xiu, they would naturally do whatever Chu Xiu said. Of course, that was unless they were going to die. If Chu Xiu really wanted them to die, they naturally wouldn't foolishly charge forward. The next morning, Chu Xiu brought Du Guangzhong and the other two, as well as some accompanying constables to the Jiang family. The Jiang family was located in a small city called Qi City. This small city used to be a large villa owned by the Qi family. Later on, the Qi family was destroyed, and the small villa was occupied by many outsiders. In the end, it developed into a small city. The Jiang family's strength was considered to be at the top of the Jianzhou prefecture. The great ancestor of the Jiang family had the strength of the three-flower realm at one's prominence. However, because he was old, he no longer cared about the family's affairs. He spent all his time cultivating in the inner house. The position of the family leader had already been handed over, and the family's affairs had also been handed over to the next generation. After arriving in Qi City, Lu Qingli introduced, "Sir, the Jiang family has a strong foundation in the Jianzhou prefecture, especially in this Qi City. The Jiang family has been in business for several generations. It's even called Jiang Banqing, which means that half of the business in Qi City belongs to the Jiang family." Chu Xiu asked, "Is there anyone in the inspector's office in Qi City?" Lu Qingli was a little embarrassed as he said, "There is, but there's only an innate stage constable and a few ordinary constables. Usually they're only in charge of petty theft and the like. Their words are basically useless when it comes to important matters." The Jianghu constable in charge of Qi City happened to be Lu Qingli's subordinate, which was why he seemed a little embarrassed. Chu Xiu didn't mind and said, "Go to the Jiang family." At this time in the Jiang family leader, Jiang Shichen, was sitting in the main seat, listening to the servant's report with a puzzled look in his eyes. Obviously, he didn't expect the new inspector to come to the Jiang family at this time. The expression of an old man below him changed a little as he said, "Master, is this new inspector here to investigate the matter of the previous inspector, Fang Jingyuan?" Back then, I advised you that the Jiang family was so careful and didn't leave any evidence behind. If Fang Jingyuan wants to investigate, just let him. Moreover, we've been filial to the disciplinary officer. When the time comes, just let the disciplinary officer put pressure on him. But you didn't listen and insisted on plotting against Fang Jingyuan. You colluded with the blood-emptiness sword Han Rang to kill Fang Jingyuan. Great, now you've left something that can be used against you. Killing an inspector of the Guanzhong torture room. If this is discovered, it'll be a crime punishable by the annihilation of the entire family. Jiang Shichen looked at the elder in disgust. Everything about the Jiang family was good, except for these old things who were always greedy for power and talked nonsense here. These elders were of the same generation as the Jiang family's great ancestor. In the end, the great ancestor had gone into closed-door cultivation and didn't care about the family's affairs, but these old fellows were still a hindrance here. Before Jiang Shichen could say anything, a Jiang family martial artist in his 40s stood up and snorted coldly. Let's investigate then. The Guanxi Torture Hall branch has already concluded that it was just an accident. Han Rang has also completely left Guanzhong, and even Fang Jingyuan's corpse has been cremated. What can this new inspector find out? Moreover, during Lord Wei's birthday celebration, our Jiang family took out 1/5 of our family's assets to create that heartwarming Jade Buddha statue. It won't be so easy for this new inspector to touch our Jiang family. On the other hand, if the few of you panic and lose your composure, you'll be causing trouble for our Jiang family. This person was Jiang Shichen's younger half-brother, Jiang Yao. He had been on Jiang Shichen's side since he was young. Now that he saw these elders' fearful expressions, he couldn't help but feel angry. The elder shouted sternly, "You brat! How dare you speak to I like this? Do you still have any respect for the rules? Do you have any respect for your seniors?" Jiang Shichen waved his hand and said, "All right, stop arguing. Why are you arguing when you haven't even seen the person? Go invite the new inspector in. Our Jiang family has been in Jianzhou for nearly 300 years. What's there to be afraid of here with our foundation? At most, we'll just deal with whatever comes our way." Chapter 159. The Jiang family welcomed Chu Xiu politely into the main hall. Jiang Shichen cupped his hands at Lu Qingli, who was the first to enter. "Lord Lu, you haven't been here for some time. May I know what brings you here this time?" In the Jianzhou prefecture, the Jiang family was most familiar with Lu Qingli. Qi City was under Lu Qingli's jurisdiction. Lu Qingli pointed at Chu Xiu behind him and said, "This is the new inspector of the Jianzhou prefecture, Chu Xiu, official Chu." Jiang Shichen and the rest of the Jiang family were about to greet Chu Xiu, but they were stunned when they saw Chu Xiu's strength. Clearly, they didn't expect the new inspector to only be in the physical invulnerability realm. However, Jiang Shichen didn't look too surprised. He only chuckled and said, "So it's official Chu. What a shame. Official Chu was too low-key when he took office. Otherwise, the Jiang family would have sent a congratulatory gift personally." Jiang Shichen was just being polite. No matter how low-key Chu Xiu was, the Jianzhou prefecture was only so big. How could the Jiang family not know about the new inspector? However, they didn't plan to do so. Chu Xiu waved his hand indifferently and said, "You're too polite, Lord Jiang. The Guanzhong torture room guards are just formalities. It doesn't matter if I have it or not." Jiang Shichen chuckled and said, "Official Chu can be indifferent, but the Jiang family can't be indifferent. I'll prepare food and drinks immediately. Official Chu, please take a seat." Seeing that Chu Xiu's attitude was still considered amiable, everyone from the Jiang family heaved a sigh of relief. They were afraid that the new inspector would be like the previous inspector, Fang Jingyuan, stubborn and unmoved. That would be a headache for them. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "There's no hurry to eat. Actually, I'm here to ask the Jiang family for help." As soon as he said that, the atmosphere immediately became a little tense. The other members of the Jiang family were afraid that Chu Xiu would ask them to help investigate the accidental death of the previous inspector. Jiang Shichen's expression was calm as he said, "Official Chu, if you have something to say, just say it. As long as my Jiang family can help, my Jiang family will definitely not decline." Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Well said. Actually, I'm here to beg for alms from you, Patriarch Jiang. Master Jiang, you should be aware of the situation in the Great Wall. Warriors and caravans from the northern Yan, eastern Qi and western Chu, as well as some miscellaneous people have gathered here. This has caused the entire Great Wall to be a mess of dragons and snakes, and has attracted many evil cultivators who want to take advantage of the chaos. It's not easy for the Guanzhong torture room to protect the safety of this area. There have been many sacrifices over the years, such as the previous inspector, Fang Jingyuan, and the Jianghu constable Wu Siping, who was under my command not long ago. These people all died in the line of duty to protect the Great Wall. The other members of the Jiang family were slightly nervous when they heard the name Fang Jingyuan, but Jiang Shichen's expression did not change. This was because he knew that the new inspector in front of him did not come for Fang Jingyuan. Otherwise he would not have added Wu Siping to the list. Everyone in the outside world knew very well what happened to Wu Siping. This arrogant Jianghu constable used to do things very carefully and would never easily take risks. In the end, the new inspector had just arrived and Wu Siping died in the line of duty. How could there be such a coincidence in the world? However, the case of Wu Siping was the same as the case of Fang Jingyuan. There was no evidence and only suspicion was useless. If the people did not report, the officials would not investigate. In any case, as long as no one investigated, it was absolutely safe. Therefore, Jiang Shichen's attention was focused on the word, asking for alms that Chu Xiu mentioned. He couldn't help but ask, "What does official Chu mean?" Chu Xiu said plainly, "It's very simple. The Guanzhong torture room protects the safety of this area, but the brothers under me are unwilling to exchange their weapons even if they are broken. I heard that the Jiang family is wealthy and even has the title of Jiang Banqing in Qi City. Therefore I am thick-skinned and would like to ask for some help from Master Jiang." When the Jiang family heard Chu Xiu say this, they immediately let out a sigh of relief. So it turned out that he was here to ask for money. Since that was the case, it was much easier to deal with. In other places, if the local martial arts forces were asked for money by the people of the imperial court, they would naturally be very disgusted and would resist. However, in Guanzhong, 99% of the aristocratic families established themselves in Guanzhong by trading with the people of the other three countries. The Guanzhong torture room controlled their lifeline, so it was very necessary to have a good relationship with the Guanzhong torture room. Not to mention asking for money, the heartwarming jade Buddha that the Jiang family gave to Wei Judwan cost a fifth of the Jiang family's entire fortune. It was a huge loss. Why did the previous patrol Fang Jingyuan die? It wasn't because he was greedy, but because he wasn't greedy. Now that Chu Xiu took the initiative to ask for something from them, it was a good thing. Therefore, Jiang Shichen immediately found a servant and whispered a few words in his ear. He turned his head and said to Chu Xiu, "Official Chu, don't worry. The Jiang family has been in Guanzhong for so many years and has been protected by the Guanzhong torture room for so many years. It's time for us to make some contributions to the Guanzhong torture room." After a while, a servant came over with a brocade box. Jiang Shichen placed the brocade box in front of Chu Xiu and said with a smile, "Official Chu, please accept it." Chu Xiu opened the brocade box. There was a row of finger-sized purple gold bars and 2 bottles of elixirs. Jiang Shichen stretched out his hand and said, 200 taels of purple gold, 2 bottles of 5th Revolution elixir raising elixir, 20 elixirs. It's just a small token, please accept it. Chu Xiu looked at the things in the brocade box, picked up a purple gold bar and played with it. He looked at Jiang Shichen and said, "It's really a small token. Patriarch Jiang, do you think that I, Chu Xiu, am a beggar?" Bang! Chu Xiu slapped the brocade box to one side. This sudden outburst shocked everyone. Even Du Guangzhong and the others did not expect that Chu Xiu would fall out with the Jiang family on the spot. The people of the Jiang family showed a trace of anger on their faces. Chu Xiu's action was like a slap to their faces. Jiang Yao, who was hot-tempered, was about to lose his temper but was stopped by Jiang Shichen. The smile on Jiang Shichen's face disappeared. He looked at Chu Xiu and said coldly, "Official Chu, what do you mean by this?" Chu Xiu said coldly, "What do I mean? 200 purple gold bars and 2 bottles of 5th Revolution elixirs are enough to send off a physical invulnerability warrior. But can you send off more than 200 constables and bailiffs of the Jian Province Inspector Hall?" Jiang Shichen suppressed the anger in his eyes and said, "Then, Official Chu, how much do you want?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Not much. Just 1/10 of the Jiang family's assets." Hearing this, Jiang Shichen was so angry that he laughed and said, "Official Chu, what a big appetite you have. Other people are greedy, but you are more ruthless than an evil dragon. You want 1/10 of the Jiang family's assets just by opening your mouth. What right do you have to say that?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Your Jiang family is rich and overbearing. You can even give 1/5 of the Jiang family's assets to the disciplinary officer as a birthday gift. Now, am I not worth 1/10 of the Jiang family's assets?" Everyone in the Jiang family could see that Chu Xiu was simply making trouble out of nothing. The Jiang family took out 1/5 of the Jiang family's assets to give Wei Juduan a birthday gift because they were bold enough to be ruthless enough to get protection. In reality, this was indeed the case. Although the Jiang family was considered a powerful force in the Zhenzhou prefecture, it was very inconspicuous in the entire Guanxi area. However, when Jiang Shiqin stood his ground and took out 1/5 of the family's assets to buy a heartwarming jade Buddha statue for Wei Juduan, the Jiang family immediately stood out and became the most outstanding person at the birthday banquet. Wei Juduan was also very satisfied with the Jiang family's gift. When the others saw Wei Juduan's attitude, they knew that Wei Juduan remembered the Jiang family's favor. Therefore, they would not provoke the Jiang family for no reason. This also allowed the Jiang family to have a smooth life in the past few years. Of course, there were exceptions. For example, Fang Jingyuan did not care about Wei Juduan's attitude and insisted on making things difficult for them. It was also impossible for the Jiang family to transfer Fang Jingyuan elsewhere. Although Wei Juduan remembered the Jiang family's favor, it did not mean that Wei Juduan would do whatever the Jiang family said. This was because it was only a favor and not a transaction. Wei Juduan would only give it if he wanted to. If Wei Juduan did not want to give it, they could not ask for it. If the Jiang family sent someone to Wei Juduan directly and asked him to transfer Fang Jingyuan away, Wei Juduan would definitely kick the Jiang family out and think that the Jiang family did not know how to appreciate favors. Since when did a small family dare to interfere with the appointment of a patroller? They were simply asking for death. Therefore, the Jiang family chose to take the risk and get rid of Fang Jingyuan. As long as they did it discreetly and did not leave any obvious evidence, when the matter was reported to Wei Juduan would stop people from investigating the Jiang family. Otherwise, if a patroller died, according to tradition, there would be a strict investigation. After this series of events, they had already earned back the money they spent on Wei Juduan's birthday gift. This transaction was rather worth it. Looking at Chu Xiu, although he was a patroller, he was just a newcomer. Most importantly, he was only in the physical invulnerability realm. What kind of benefits could a physical invulnerability patroller bring to them? This was something the Jiang family could not think of. Therefore, when Chu Xiu asked for 1/10 of the Jiang family's assets, it could only be described as wishful thinking. At this moment, even the Jiang family elders who had been hesitant were about to turn hostile. However, at this moment, Jiang Shiqin suddenly waved his hand and stopped them from saying anything. Looking at Chu Xiu, Jiang Shiqin smiled and said, "Official Chu, the thing you want is too precious. I have to report it to the patriarch before I can make a decision. Moreover, 1/10 of the Jiang family's assets are not only in Qi City, but also in the outside world. I need time to gather them. I wonder if Official Chu can extend the deadline by 3 days. After 3 days, the Jiang family will definitely give you an answer, Official Chu." Chu Xiu looked deeply at Jiang Shichen and said, "All right, I will give you 3 days. I hope that after 3 days, you will make a rational decision." Chapter 160. Outside Qi City, Chu Xiu looked back at the Jiang family and said calmly, "No wonder the Jiang family could rise in Zhenzhou. This Jiang Shichen is quite a character." Du Guangzhong nodded and said, "That's right. The Jiang family dared to make a move against Fang Jingyuan in the past. They are indeed audacious." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "That's not what I meant. I'm referring to his attitude today. I've already gone too far just now and my strength is still there, but this Jiang Shichen was still able to hold himself back from falling out with me. If it were you, would you be able to do the same?" Du Guangzhong thought about it and shook his head. No. Putting himself in Jiang Shichen's shoes, Chu Xiu's behavior just now was basically looking for trouble. If he were the head of the family, it would be strange if he agreed. Even other small families would not let Chu Xiu bully them like this, let alone someone as powerful as Jiang Shichen, who dared to plot against and kill an inspector. Just because you're an inspector, you can just ask for 1/10 of my family's wealth. Are you the Guangzhong torture room or the 36 northern bandits? Then what should we do in 3 days, sir? Chu Xiu said calmly, "Nothing. I've said it before. I hope the Jiang family will make a rational choice in 3 days. The choice is not mine but theirs." After saying that, Chu Xiu turned around and left with his people. Meanwhile, in the Jiang family, Jiang Yao said with dissatisfaction, "Master, Chu Xiu is so arrogant. Why are you still tolerating it? 1/10 of the family's wealth? How dare he ask for this? He doesn't know what he's talking about." Jiang Shichen said coldly. Of course I know that Chu Xiu is deliberately extorting the Jiang family. However, the reason why the Jiang family has been able to come this far is because of our cautiousness and decisiveness. When it's time to make a move, you have to be decisive, but you can't act rashly. Think about it, the Guanzhong torture room's inspectors are almost all experts in the three-flower realm. But now, a martial artist in the physical invulnerability realm suddenly appeared. How could he have gotten to this position without any background? The previous inspector, Fang Jingyuan, is rigid and inflexible. He has long been disliked by Lord Wei, and he doesn't have any backing. That's why we dare to make a move. But as for Chu Xiu, let's first investigate his background and see if he has the right to take 1/10 of the Jiang family's assets. After that, Jiang Shichen said to Jiang Yao, let's go to the Shang prefecture with me. We need to ask Lord Wei Han's Han about Chu Xiu's background. This time the Jiang family only took out such a small amount to send off Chu Xiu. It wasn't that they looked down on Chu Xiu, but they had already spent a lot of money on an inspector. However, it wasn't Chu Xiu, but Wei Han's Han, the inspector of the Shang prefecture. After Fang Jingyuan's death, Wei Han's Han was the most active. He wanted to take the opportunity to take over the Jianzhou prefecture. The Jiang family was prepared to invest in advance, so they gave Wei Han's Han a big gift. However, who would have thought that Wei Han's Han didn't take over the Jianzhou prefecture in the end? Instead, the higher-ups sent a new inspector, which made the Jiang family's gift go to waste. Of course, it wasn't exactly a free gift. At least Wei Han's Han remembered the Jiang family's kindness. Even if Wei Han's Han didn't take over the Jianzhou prefecture in the end, he still had a certain relationship with the Jiang family. The area of the Shang prefecture was similar to that of the Jianzhou prefecture, but it was much more prosperous. There were more than 20 small cities under its jurisdiction, and the Shangzhou city in the center was also more prosperous than Jianzhou city. Moreover, Wei Hanshan's way of doing things was different from most of the inspectors. Most of the inspectors of the Guanzhong torture hall, even if they had residences outside, would spend most of their time living in the hall of inspectors. Wei Han's Han, on the other hand, was fond of luxury and enjoyment. He had a special mansion in Shangzhou city, and even his office was in his own residence. He would only go to the hall of inspectors if there was a major event. At this time, Jiang Shichen brought some people to the front of Wei Hanshan's mansion. After reporting, they were brought to the guest hall. After a while, Wei Han's Han yawned and walked out in a loose brocade robe. He said slowly, "Isn't this the Jiang family's patriarch? Why are you free to come to my place?" Previously, Wei Han's Han was quite enthusiastic about the Jiang family. If he could successfully take over the Jianzhou prefecture, he would definitely make friends with a large local clan like the Jiang family. However, now that the new inspector of the Jianzhou prefecture had taken office, he gave up on this idea. His attitude towards the Jiang family was very casual, but after all he had received benefits from them, so he still had to meet them when it was necessary. Jiang Shichen cupped his hands respectfully and said, "This humble one has come to find Lord Wei to inquire about the new inspector of the Jianzhou prefecture, Chu Xiu. That official Chu has really gone too far." Hearing that it was about Chu Xiu, Wei Hanshan's interest was piqued. He asked, "What's wrong? What kind of trouble did your new inspector cause this time?" Jiang Shichen's face had a trace of grief and indignation as he said, "Chu Xiu came to my Jiang family to beg for alms. According to the rules, my Jiang family gave Chu Xiu quite a lot of money. However, who would have thought that Chu Xiu would demand an exorbitant price, asking for 1/10 of our Jiang family's assets?" Hearing this, Wei Han's Han was speechless. He couldn't help but sigh and say, "This Chu Xiu really dares to ask for 1/10 of the family's assets. Is he so poor that he's crazy?" The position of the inspector was the lowest level in the Guanzhong torture room. It was an existence that controlled the power of a region. In a prefecture, there were more than 10 small cities and dozens of big and small powers. If there was a place that needed help from the Guanzhong torture room, it was normal for them to take out some gifts. However, Chu Xiu directly asked for 1/10 of the other party's assets. This was no different from robbery. Even Wei Han's Han didn't dare to do this, so where did this Chu Xiu get his confidence from? Therefore, Wei Han's Han asked in surprise, "This Chu Xiu has gone too far, but you still haven't fallen out with him?" Jiang Shichen said, "I also want to fall out with him, but Chu Xiu looks so aggressive. I don't know who his backer is. If he has some connections in the main hall, wouldn't it be easy for him to take advantage of a small family like my Jiang family? Therefore I asked Lord Wei for help. I want to find out more about this Chu Xiu." Wei Hanshan looked at Jiang Shichen with a faint smile. Patriarch Jiang is quite careful. Jiang Shichen smiled apologetically and said, people in the pugilistic world die if they aren't careful. My Jiang family still has a lot of clansmen behind them, so I can't be careless. Wei Hanshan waved his hand and said, all right, since Patriarch Jiang has said so, I will help you this time. Chu Xiu's background is really not simple. He also has a backer. Hearing Wei Hanshan's words, Jiang Shichen immediately thought that it was a close shave. The waters of the Guanzhong torture room were deep. The 4 disciplinary officers were only forces on the surface. The truly powerful cultivators were all in the main hall. For example, the leaders of the disciplinary bureau were said to be stronger than the 4 disciplinary officers. But then Wei Hanshan said, but you don't have to worry. Chu Xiu can't threaten you. This Chu Xiu may be young, but he is quite famous among the younger generation. He is someone who has been on the Longhu list. He used to be a wandering cultivator, but later joined the Blue Dragon Society. He was an assassin in the Blue Dragon Society for a period of time, and it was said that he caused a stir in the east of Yen. Later, for some unknown reason, he suddenly betrayed the Blue Dragon Society and joined the Guanzhong torture room, becoming the Jianzhou patrol. And his backer, the key to him becoming the patrol, is the Guanzhong hero, Chu Yuanxing. This person was personally recommended by Chu Yuanxing to Lady Guanxiu. It is said that he is a distant relative of Great Hero Chu. Since Great Hero Chu has spoken, Lady Guanxiu naturally has to give him face. Otherwise, do you think that a martial artist in the physical invulnerability realm like him could become the patrol so easily? Wei Hanshan looked at Jiang Shichen and said calmly, although Chu Xiu is an outstanding talent on the Longhu list, his reputation is in the east of Yen. No matter how outstanding he is still only a member of the younger generation. There is no need to worry about him. As for Great Hero Chu's recommendation, you don't have to worry about it. Great Hero Chu has recommended many people over the years. Have you seen him interfere? Moreover, even if Great Hero Chu wants to interfere, he can't. This is an internal matter of the Guanzhong torture room. Great Hero Chu knows his limits. Hearing this, Jiang Shichen immediately heaved a sigh of relief. He cupped his hands at Wei Hanshan and said, thank you Lord Wei for the information. Wei Hanshan's information was very important to Jiang Shichen. Without absolute confidence, how would he dare to fall out with Chu Xiu? In the past, the Jiang family dared to attack Fang Jingyuan because Fang Jingyuan had no backing. In fact, Wei Juduan didn't even like him. Moreover, the Jiang family still owed Wei Juduan a favor. Although Chu Xiu was weaker than Fang Jingyuan and had a backer, it was clear that this backer was useless. The great hero of Guanzhong did have a great reputation in Guanzhong, but it was only reputation, not power. Just like what Wei Hanshan said, Chu Yuanxing wouldn't easily interfere with the internal affairs of the Guanzhong torture room. If he had to interfere with every person he recommended, then who would have the final say in the Guanzhong torture room? Jiang Shichen smiled and handed over a brocade box. Inside were 500 taels of purple gold and 2 sixth revolution pills. Although there were only 2 pills, they were more valuable than the 2 bottles of pills that Chu Xiu had. The items in this brocade box were also more than double the amount that he had prepared for Chu Xiu. What do you mean by this, Lord Jiang? Wei Hanshan kept the brocade box without changing his expression and asked. Jiang Shichen smiled and said, it's just a small gift. I hope Lord Wei won't mind. My Jiang family is preparing to expand our business to the Shangzhou province. I hope Lord Wei will take care of us when the time comes. Also, if Chu Xiu still wants to make things difficult for my Jiang family, I hope Lord Wei will put in a few words of justice for my Jiang family. Although the Jiang family had left some impression in Wei Juduan's mind, they still had to make friends with the low-level patrol envoys. Originally, Chu Xiu was a very good choice. However, this Chu Xiu was too greedy. Therefore, they had no choice but to make friends with Wei Hanshan. At most, they would move a part of their business to the Shangzhou province. Chapter 161. 3 days later, Chu Xiu summoned Du Guangzhong and the other 2. He asked them to bring all the Jianghu constables and constables under the inspector hall and gather them outside Qi City. Du Guangzhong and the other 2 were shocked and asked, Sir, are you going to? Chu Xiu said lightly, 3 days are up. I've given the Jiang family time. When the time comes, we'll see what the Jiang family will choose. If the Jiang family makes the wrong choice, then I'm sorry. Du Guangzhong and the other 2 felt a chill. Looking at Chu Xiu's behavior, they knew what Chu Xiu meant when he said sorry. However, the 3 of them didn't dare to dissuade Chu Xiu's decision. they could only follow his orders. There was only one advantage to establishing authority through threats. It was that in a short period of time, his subordinates wouldn't dare to say a word of nonsense or disobey him. The bodies of Wu Siping and the others had just been buried. They didn't want to follow in Wu Siping's footsteps. When they arrived at the Jiang family in Qi City again, Chu Xiu led his men into the Jiang family's mansion. However, this time there wasn't even anyone to greet them. Jiang Shichen and the others didn't even get up when they saw Chu Xiu enter. Chu Xiu didn't mind. He just said indifferently, "Clan leader Jiang, I wonder if you've made up your mind after 3 days?" Jiang Shichen said blandly, "I'm sorry, I can't comply with your Excellency Chu's request. It's true that the Guanzhong Torture Hall protects the safety of the Guanzhong area, but it doesn't mean that the martial arts forces of the Guanzhong area have to bow down to the Guanzhong Torture Hall and let it plunder." Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said lightly, "Master Jiang, is this the result after 3 days of consideration? I didn't ask for 1/10 of the family's assets for nothing. The things that you've done in Jianzhou Prefecture can't be hidden from others. I'm actually very easy to talk to. As long as I take the things, I'll protect all the businesses of the Jiang family in Jianzhou Prefecture. You don't have to be as sneaky as before." Jiang Shichen shouted coldly, "Chu Xiu, even if you're the patrol of the Guanzhong torture room, you can't slander me. Since when did the Jiang family do anything sneaky? Moreover, the Guanzhong torture room has always relied on evidence to speak. Do you have any evidence for what you're saying?" Jiang Shichen was very confident in facing Chu Xiu. Chu Yuanxing, Chu Xiu's backer, would not interfere with the internal affairs of the Guanzhong torture room, and the Jiangs had also hidden and destroyed all the smuggling evidence. They were more innocent than anyone else. Even if they let Chu Xiu investigate now, Chu Xiu would not be able to find anything. However, because of Chu Yuanxing, the Jiangs could not do anything to Chu Xiu. No one cared about Fang Jingyuan's death, but someone would definitely care about Chu Xiu's death. 2 patrols had died in such a short time, and one of them was introduced by the hero of Guanzhong, Chu Yuanxing. It would be strange if the higher-ups did not send someone to investigate. However, not killing Chu Xiu did not mean that they would let Chu Xiu be arrogant here. After today, Jiang Shichen was prepared to unite all the martial arts forces in Jianzhou Prefecture to boycott Chu Xiu and ruin his reputation as a patrol. The Guanzhong torture room's review of patrols also depended on their achievements. You, a patrol, have already lost your reputation in your territory. One could imagine how the Guanzhong torture room would think of you. A light punishment would be a reprimand, a heavy punishment. You might even be stripped of your position as a patrol. Looking at Jiang Shichen's respectful attitude, Chu Xiu shook his head and sighed. "Master Jiang, I told you 3 days ago that I hoped you would make a rational choice. Unfortunately, you still made the wrong choice in the end. Don't you want evidence? Fine, I'll give you evidence today." As he spoke, Chu Xiu took out a pile of ores from the space secret box and threw them on the ground. He said coldly, "These are precious ores from northern Yen. They are refined into gold and are prohibited from being smuggled to other countries. Qi City's Jiang family has defied the torture room's rules, smuggled prohibited items, and tarnished the reputation of Guanzhong. They deserve death." Everyone from the Jiang family was stunned, including Du Guangzhong. They didn't expect that Chu Xiu was blatantly framing them. The hot-tempered Jiang Yao stood out and pointed at Chu Xiu, shouting, "Chu Xiu, are you treating the Jiang family as idiots or the Guanzhong torture room as idiots? Just you wait, this isn't over yet. The Jiang family is old friends with Lord Wei Juduan. After today, the Jiang family will definitely complain about you to Lord Wei Juduan. Letting someone like you be the patrol of the Guanzhong torture room is simply reckless." A disdainful sneer was suddenly heard. However, before anyone could react, Chu Xiu's hand was already on his red sleeve blade when the sneer was heard. The blade ray condensed from the blood-refined spirit gang was unsheathed. A green dragon emerged from the sea, and the momentum of the blade soared into the sky. In an instant, the magnificent scarlet blade light filled the entire hall. Its speed was extremely fast and its power was also extremely strong. No one present, including Du Guangzhong and Chu Xiu's subordinates, expected Chu Xiu to suddenly make a move. However, the blade of Chu Xiu's azure dragon in the sleeve was extremely fast. It was so fast that before Jiang Yao could react, the blade light was already in front of him. "Defend." Jiang Yao didn't even have time to draw his sword. He directly struck out with both palms. Green-colored Gang Qi suddenly exploded and condensed into a Gang Qi shield. He wanted to temporarily block Chu Xiu's blade. However, the power of the blood-refined god shield was beyond his imagination. His Gang Qi shield couldn't even block for a moment in front of Chu Xiu's blade. It was directly smashed by Chu Xiu's blade. With a loud explosion of Gang Qi, Jiang Yao was directly sent flying by Chu Xiu's blade. The huge blade wound on his chest was bleeding, and it was unknown whether he was still alive or not. Chu Xiu held the red sleeve blade and said coldly, "I didn't treat anyone as an idiot. However, sometimes the process isn't important. What matters is the result. Today I destroyed your Jiang family. If I say that your Jiang family is smuggling contraband, then you are smuggling contraband. If I say that you colluded with evil spirits, then you colluded with evil spirits. It doesn't matter whether you did it or not. What's important is that you did it when I said you did it." Jiang Shichen's eyes were filled with anger, but more than that, there was regret and fear. Previously, he had always treated Chu Xiu with the same attitude as a normal patrol inspector. It wasn't until now that he realized that Chu Xiu was different from those people. Fang Jingyuan still had to act according to the rules when he found trouble with the Jiang family. He would only take action when he had enough evidence after investigating. In Chu Xiu's opinion, his way of doing things was simply lawless. There were no rules at all. Chu Xiu turned around and said to Du Guangzhong and the others who were still stunned, "What are you still doing there? We can't let any of these sinners of the Jiang family go." Du Guangzhong and the other two gritted their teeth. In any case, the three of them had already boarded Chu Xiu's pirate ship. All of their weaknesses were in Chu Xiu's hands. No matter how excessive Chu Xiu's actions were, they would still follow suit. Therefore, the three of them had no choice but to take out signal arrows and release them out of the meeting hall. The martial artists from the patrol hall who were lying in ambush outside the city immediately entered the city, instantly attracting the attention of most of the martial artists in Qi City. It was important to know that apart from some major missions in the Guanzhong torture room, it was rare for so many martial artists to gather together. At this moment, they thought that some infamous demon had come to Qi City. Jiang Shiqin gritted his teeth and said, "Fine, fine, fine. Chu Xiu, it seems like you've been preparing to take action against the Jiang family for a long time. Very well, the Jiang family will accompany you to the end." As soon as he finished speaking, Jiang Shiqin prepared to gather all the martial artists of the Jiang family to resist Chu Xiu. They could not just sit and wait for death. However, at this moment an old voice suddenly sounded, "Wait." Outside the meeting hall, an old man in a green robe walked in. His hair and beard were all white and his face was full of wrinkles. His aura was very vague, but it revealed a smell of decay. "Elder Ancestor. Why are you out?" Jiang Shiqin and the others hurried to help the Elder Ancestor up but were blocked by the Elder Ancestor. "There's no need. I'm not so old that I need someone to help me up." The Elder Ancestor looked deeply into Chu Xiu's eyes and said, "Official Chu is young and promising, and his methods are shocking. This time the Jiang family has made an error in judgment. The Jiang family is willing to hand over 1/10 of our family's assets to Official Chu. From now on, the Jiang family is willing to follow Official Chu's lead." "Elder Ancestor." Jiang Shiqin hurriedly shouted. The other Jiang family members also looked at the Elder Ancestor with puzzled and doubtful eyes. They all thought that the Elder Ancestor had come out because he saw the family was in danger, so he had come out to fight one last time. However, they never expected that the first thing the Elder Ancestor would do was admit defeat to Chu Xiu. The Elder Ancestor glanced at Jiang Shiqin and sighed, "Fool. In the past, you were the calmest among the younger generation of the Jiang family, so I appointed you to lead the Jiang family. However, I didn't expect you to be so foolish this time. Don't forget where this is. This is Guanzhong. The Guanzhong that belongs to the Guanzhong torture room. If Official Chu wants to deal with the Jiang family, even if this reason is a little more ridiculous, the Jiang family will still be at a disadvantage if it is reported to the higher-ups. This is because the Guanzhong torture room will not go wrong." Chu Xiu looked at the Jiang clan's patriarch with a faint smile. Although this old man was old, he wasn't muddle-headed. He could see very clearly. However, Jiang Shiqin still argued, "Lord Guanxiu is impartial and impartial. If things get out of hand, Lord Guanxiu will not stand by and do nothing." The Elder Ancestor shook his head and sighed. "You still don't understand. No matter how impartial and impartial he is, Lord Guan still cares about the benefits of the Guanzhong torture room. If the Jiang family tells the outside world that the inspector of the Guanzhong torture room took things by force and is comparable to bandits, this is the truth. However, it will ultimately damage the image of the entire Guanzhong torture room. This is something that the Guanzhong torture room will never allow. Therefore, if things get out of hand, although official Chu will be punished for breaking the rules, the Jiang family will also be accused of these unreliable crimes and killed. In Guanzhong, the Guanzhong torture room will not make mistakes. The ones who are wrong are us. Once things get out of hand, both sides will suffer. Chapter 162. Compared to Jiang Shiqin, the patriarch of the Jiang family had stayed in Guanzhong for more than 100 years. He had witnessed the process of Guanzhong torture room growing from weak to strong and gradually rising. He naturally knew more about Guanzhong torture room than Jiang Shiqin. Guanzhong torture room would not allow others to affect their image. Once things got out of hand, even if Chu Xiu threw out this so-called evidence in front of everyone, Guanzhong torture room would make this an ironclad case. So if things got out of hand, it would be a situation where both sides would suffer. The Jiang family had established themselves in Guanzhong for so many years, but this was the first time he had seen such an unruly inspector. However, even if Chu Xiu did not follow the rules, his status in Guanzhong torture room was not something the Jiang family could compare to. Also, he was not like Fang Jingyuan who had no backing. They could deal with him in secret. Now that Chu Xiu had put on such a show, the patriarch of the Jiang family could not think of any other way other than to admit defeat and seek revenge in the future. Chu Xiu looked at the Jiang clan's patriarch and sighed. He shook his head and said, "Your Jiang clan does have someone who understands. Unfortunately, I gave your Jiang clan a chance, but you didn't cherish it." The patriarch of the Jiang family's expression changed slightly. "Official Chu, what do you mean? Could it be that you want both sides to suffer heavy losses? You have gone too far. If this goes to the higher-ups, you will lose your position as inspector. The Jiang family has no deep grudge with you. Is this worth it?" Chu Xiu said coolly, "Why do we have to go to the higher-ups? If we destroy the entire Jiang family, would anyone still go and make a fuss? I have said that I gave you a chance, but you did not cherish it. Old Master Jiang, you have been in the Jianghu for a long time. You should know that when it comes to doing something, either you do it or you do it to the extreme. Today your Jiang family was forced to lower their heads and hand over 1/10 of their assets. You must be very dissatisfied, right? Who knows how you will plot against me in the future. In order to avoid future troubles, I ask that all of you die." As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu shouted, "Kill!" As soon as the word kill was uttered, Du Guangzhong and the others immediately charged forward. While they were talking, the other Jianghu constables from the patrol hall had also arrived at the Jiang clan and charged forward. The great ancestor of the Jiang family widened his eyes when he saw this. He pointed at Chu Xiu and shouted, "Madman! Are you so confident that you can destroy the Jiang family? Don't you know the relationship between my Jiang family and Lord Wei Juduan? Have you considered the consequences of destroying my Jiang family?" Chu Xiu held the red sleeve knife in his hand as he walked step by step towards the Jiang clan patriarch. He said indifferently, "After talking for so long, your Jiang clan's confidence still comes from Lord Wei Juduan. Unfortunately, Lord Wei is not here now. Strength that is not your own will never be your own. Your Jiang clan's confidence is very weak." As soon as he finished speaking, the red sleeve knife in Chu Xiu's hand suddenly slashed forward. The crimson saber was more than 10 feet long, and a ferocious killing intent filled the air. The atmosphere in the entire meeting hall suddenly turned cold. The great ancestor of the Jiang clan's eyes suddenly shone with a sharp light. He shouted, "When the family is in danger, no one should hold back. Whether the Jiang clan can survive this crisis depends on today." The great ancestor of the Jiang clan was indeed a little timid before. He still chose to admit defeat when Chu Xiu had forced him to such an extent. But in fact, the great ancestor of the Jiang clan was just thinking of the big picture. He didn't want to fight with Chu Xiu until both sides suffered losses. Now that Chu Xiu had decided to go all out, the Jiang clan also had the courage to fight to the death. Although the great ancestor of the Jiang clan was old and his qi and blood were declining, he was not someone who could be killed by a junior in the physical invulnerability realm. Facing Chu Xiu's saber, the great ancestor of the Jiang clan formed a fist print with one hand and slammed it down. His seemingly declining body actually bloomed with a dazzling sharpness. White gang qi suddenly erupted, and the fist print fell like thousands of flowers blooming, one layer on top of the other. Bursts of gang qi explosions rang out, directly blasting Chu Xiu away. The realm of 3 flowers at one's prominence was to condense one's essence, qi and spirit to their peak state, converging them into one. It was like stepping into another world. As long as one could step into the realm of 3 flowers at one's prominence at a young age, they could even slow down their own aging. Among the 5 levels of Qi-controlling realm, the inner and physical invulnerability realms were different worlds. The 3 flowers and 5 Qis were another world, and the final realm of oneness of heaven and man was the peak of Qi-controlling realm. In the past, Chu Xiu could easily kill a physical invulnerability realm with internal invulnerability. But now, it was extremely difficult for him to kill an expert who had condensed the 3 flowers at the crown as a physical invulnerability realm, even if the person in front of him was actually old. The great ancestor of the Jiang clan said coldly, "I may be old, but I can still swing my fists." "Is that so? I wonder how many more fists you can swing now, old Master Jiang?" A glimmer of sharpness appeared in Chu Xiu's eyes. He sheathed his saber and punched. His hand formed a seal, and the great Vajra wheel print suddenly fell. Golden Gang Qi bloomed, suppressing evil and slaying demons. Seeing that Chu Xiu had actually used a Buddhist technique, the great ancestor of the Jiang clan was also a little incredulous. This Chu Xiu was vicious and ruthless, and he did not leave any room for maneuvers. How could such a person use a Buddhist technique? What a joke. However, at this moment, the great ancestor of the Jiang clan could not be bothered to think about this. His old body once again exploded with extremely powerful Gang Qi waves. As his punches landed, Gang Qi bloomed like 100 flowers, stacking layer upon layer and exploding with astonishing might. The ingenuity of this fist technique was that it could explode 1 level of true Qi twice or even more to the point of exploding. Spirit and Qi as one, Gang Qi fluttered and agitated. At this moment, the great ancestor of the Jiang clan seemed to have recovered to his peak, and his attacks were extremely powerful. Even though Chu Xiu's great Vajra wheel print was extremely powerful, he could only be sent flying with a single punch, and even his internal organs were slightly shaken. However, right now Chu Xiu seemed as if he did not feel it at all. He charged forward again and again in a frenzy, displaying the close combat killing technique of the 9 words formula to the extreme, and occasionally launching sneak attacks with the great violet sun palm. However, this evil palm technique was not very useful against a cultivator at the level of the Jiang clan's great ancestor. The great ancestor's inner force cultivation far surpassed Chu Xiu's. The moment the violet sun demonic flames entered his body, he forced them out, and in the end he punched back at Chu Xiu. In the beginning, the great ancestor of the Jiang clan did not feel anything. Even the other cultivators from the Jiang clan saw that their great ancestor was still so valiant and had a strong aura. However, towards the end, the great ancestor of the Jiang clan felt that something was not right. The saying, "Fist is afraid of the young and strong," was somewhat problematic in the pugilistic world. However, if one was in the prime of his life while the other was in a declining state of vital energy and blood, then under the situation where both parties were about the same level, the former would most likely win. After all, as cultivators, the decline of their physical body would inevitably affect their battle prowess. Right now, the great ancestor of the Jiang clan was old enough. He was so old that he had to go into seclusion and reduce his activities to extend his lifespan. Although he was suppressing Chu Xiu was exchanging his life for his injuries. Every time the great ancestor of the Jiang clan punched out, he was actually punching out his few remaining lives. The great ancestor of the Jiang clan took a deep breath, and a hint of determination appeared in his eyes. This was a calamity for the Jiang clan, and it was also karma. It was time to pay it back. Back then, when Jiang Shiqin wanted to kill Fang Jingyuan, he had reported to him, and the great ancestor of the Jiang clan had agreed. That was because Fang Jingyuan's character was a little too inflexible. He was stubborn to the extreme, and he was unmoved by force or persuasion. Furthermore, Fang Jingyuan had already set his sights on the Jiang clan. Once he found something that could be used against them and caused a huge commotion, it would be extremely difficult for even Wei Juduan to protect the Jiang clan. That was why the Jiang clan took the risk and killed Fang Jingyuan. This way no one would target the Jiang clan. Who would have thought that after the death of Fang Jingyuan, who was stubbornly adhering to the rules, a daring lunatic would appear. Although the former was troublesome, he would not take the Jiang clan's life. On the other hand, the latter would really dare to destroy the Jiang clan. Perhaps this was karma, but it was too late for regrets now. All he could do was to use all his strength to kill Chu Xiu. Only then could he win the last chance of survival for the Jiang clan. At this moment, white Gang Qi surged around the great ancestor of the Jiang clan. The powerful force of his punch gathered at one point. It was unusually dazzling and resplendent. However, in comparison, the great ancestor of the Jiang clan seemed to have aged more than 10 years in an instant. He had an aura of decay. The aging and decaying body formed a very sharp contrast with the magnificent and resplendent force of the punch. However, when the punch landed, the powerful force directly enveloped the entire meeting hall. It was as if a vortex had formed, pulling everyone's attention into it. Facing the great ancestor of the Jiang clan's punch, Chu Xiu's eyes revealed a hint of seriousness. Cultivators like the great ancestor of the Jiang clan, who had reached the end of their lifespan and could only drag out an ignoble existence, looked very weak. However, in reality, when it came time to fight with their lives on the line, they were more terrifying than anyone else. This was because existences like the great ancestor of the Jiang clan already knew that their lifespan was coming to an end and that they would definitely die. Therefore, in this final battle, they were able to disregard life and death and sublimate themselves to the extreme, erupting with their strongest power. The brilliant and magnificent punch was burning the life of the great ancestor of the Jiang clan. It was extremely powerful and blocked all the space around Chu Xiu's body to dodge, forcing him to take it head-on. Clenching the red sleeve blade in his hand, Chu Xiu's aura became extremely terrifying at this moment. It was as if he was a devil coming out of hell. Evil black gas with endless hatred lingered on Chu Xiu's blade. In Chu Xiu's eyes. When the blade slashed out, it was as if the gates of hell had opened. The cold intent made the temperature of the entire meeting hall drop instantly, as if it was a harsh winter. 3 blades of Avicii. However, this time Chu Xiu did not use the first blade. Instead, he directly used the terrifying power of the second blade. The pitch-black blade light seemed to be on the verge of shattering under the dazzling fist force, but in the end, the terrifying demonic blade suddenly erupted with a shocking power of blood. With a loud bang, the fist force dissipated. The great ancestor of the Jiang clan looked at Chu Xiu as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, his body swayed and he fell to the ground with a loud bang. Great ancestor! Behind him, Jiang Shichen and the others cried out at the same time, their eyes filled with grief. Chapter 163. Even Chu Xiu couldn't fully control the power of the 3 blades of Avicii. In the past, when Chu Xiu used the second blade, he almost couldn't suppress the powerful backfire. But now, after using the second blade, Chu Xiu immediately formed the Zhi character formula and used the inner lion seal. The powerful force of the inner lion seal suppressed his own backfire easily. As the old ancestor of the Jiang family was killed, the other members of the Jiang family were in despair. Just as Chu Xiu said, this time Chu Xiu wouldn't give them a chance to make a scene. The entire Jiang family was dead. Who would make a scene? Run! Run! Jiang Shichen shouted at the juniors of the Jiang family. Now he only hoped that these talented juniors of the Jiang family could escape. In this way the Jiang family would still have a glimmer of hope. However, at this time Chu Xiu had used the inner lion seal to completely suppress the backfire of the 3 blades of Avicii. He walked over with the blade and said faintly, "Now you want to escape? It's too late." If the old ancestor of the Jiang family and Jiang Shichen had joined hands to stop Chu Xiu and the others, it was still possible for the rest of the Jiang family to escape. But now that the old ancestor of the Jiang family was dead, it was impossible for Jiang Shichen to stop Chu Xiu alone. The red sleeve blade slashed over. In an instant, the blade radiance was like a drizzle. The powerful blood-refined divine gang was mixed in the blade radiance and burst out. The powerful force made people tremble. It directly forced Jiang Shichen to the extreme. "I'll fight with you," Jiang Shichen shouted angrily. At this time, the white gang qi around his body turned a bit red. The blood and qi in his body surged and began to burn crazily. When he punched, the blood-colored fist radiance made him look extremely terrifying. To think that you still have a sliver of leeway even after going all out. Compared to your old ancestor, you are far inferior. The first blade of the Avicii Dao's 3 blades slashed down with a loud rumble. The Avicii Dao's gate of death opened wide, and a pitch-black blade light streaked across the sky. Jiang Shichen's body fell to the ground with a loud bang. His body was directly cut into 2, but strangely, not a single drop of blood flowed out. Looking at Jiang Shichen's corpse, Chu Xiu shook his head. If Jiang Shichen really wanted to put his life on the line, Chu Xiu might be able to deter him. But just now, this fellow had still held back a little bit of strength, or perhaps he was imagining that he would be able to escape after severely injuring Chu Xiu. This was really courting death. He didn't even dare to go all out. If such a person didn't die, who would? With the death of the old ancestor of the Jiang family and Jiang Shichen, the other martial artists of the Jiang family were really not qualified to compete with the martial artists of the Guanzhong torture room. The martial artist who came from the Guanzhong torture room, whether they were trained by themselves or joined halfway like Chu Xiu, were at least a level higher than the martial artists of the Jianghu at the same level. For example, although there were a few physical invulnerability experts among the elders of the Jiang family, they were completely no match for Du Guangzhong and the others. After a quarter of an hour, Du Guangzhong walked over and cupped his hands at Chu Xiu. With some discomfort he said, "Official Chu, the people of the Jiang family have all been killed." What happened today could be said to be the biggest impact on Du Guangzhong. In the past, Du Guangzhong was a standard old-school constable of the Jianghu. Although he didn't have a chivalrous heart, he strictly followed the rules of the Guangzhong torture room. As a result, in recent years he could be said to have completely degenerated. Not only did he embezzle taxes, but now he even massacred the martial arts forces in Guangzhong without sufficient evidence. He killed them all. It was the first time he had done such a thing, so he was not used to it. Go and open the Jiang family's treasury and other places. Move all the resources into the meeting hall, ordered Chu Xiu. After a while, Du Guangzhong and the other two immediately moved all the things into the meeting hall. There were martial arts manuals, cultivation resources, and some sabers, swords, weapons, purple gold, and other precious treasures. In total, there were more than a dozen big boxes. After calling all the warriors of the Guangzhong torture room who participated in the massacre, Chu Xiu looked at everyone present and said in a deep voice, "The Guangzhong torture room has its own rules, but I, Chu Xiu, also have my own rules, Chu Xiu. Those who are obedient will be rewarded, and those who put in the most effort will also be rewarded." Chu Xiu pointed at the things plundered from the Jiang family and said in a deep voice, 20% of these things are yours, 30% is mine, and 50% is to be handed over to the torture chamber. How much you can take doesn't depend on me, but on whether you have the ability to do it. As soon as these words were said, the constables of the patrol hall all showed surprise and excitement in their eyes. It wasn't that they hadn't seen good things before, but the Guangzhong torture room would never distribute things so simply and crudely like Chu Xiu. For example, the taxes of the Guangzhong torture room were collected from the bottom, and then distributed to the lower levels according to the number of people. The amount given depended entirely on the internal decision of the torture chamber. But now Chu Xiu placed all the benefits in front of them. How much they could take didn't depend on others, but only on their own ability. In this way, the things they could get were simply unimaginable for ordinary missions. Looking at the people present, Chu Xiu's eyes revealed a look of contemplation. The Guangzhong torture room was very powerful. After Chu Kuanga laid the foundation for the Guangzhong torture room, Guan Xiu was able to lead the Guangzhong torture room to rise because of the word rules. Although the rules of the Guangzhong torture room were really strict in the beginning, the lower levels of the Guangzhong torture room slacked off as time went on. Even if Guan Xiu was really impartial, he couldn't control people's hearts. The resources that the Jianghu constables at the bottom could obtain were too little. In the beginning they could still maintain some spirit, but in the end, the purpose of those Jianghu constables joining the Guangzhong torture hall had changed from being outstanding to idling around. When most of the constables felt that they had no hope of being promoted, they would usually slack off and start idling around. Anyway, as long as they didn't make any mistakes, they would always be members of the Guangzhong torture room, and they could also receive a decent salary on time. Although there wouldn't be any major problems in this way, it would make everything gloomy. Looking at the people present, Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "The land of Guangzhong has its current peace and order because of the Guangzhong torture room. All the credit for this is the foundation that the predecessors of the Guangzhong torture room laid down. However, some of the martial arts forces in the land of Guangzhong think that they are the masters of this place. They disregard the law and discipline and don't take the Guangzhong torture room seriously. I don't care how the previous patrol inspector did things, and I don't care how the disciplinary officer does things. But in my Chu Xiu's territory, no matter if it's a sect or an aristocratic family, all of you must learn one word: reverence. Don't be afraid of making a big deal out of this. Even if you do, I will still support you." The constables and constables present all had a strange look in their eyes. They said in a low voice, "Yes, sir." For the constables and constables in the Jian Province Inspector Hall, they had been sulking for a long time. Before Fang Jingyuan, all the inspectors in the Jian Province Inspector Hall were mediocre people. All they wanted was stability. As long as they didn't cause any big trouble, they would basically give in to the sects and aristocratic families under them. Later on, when Fang Jingyuan became the inspector, although he wouldn't give in to the sects and aristocratic families, he was very pedantic. He would only make a move after there was conclusive evidence. However, the crux of the problem was that if the sects and aristocratic families in the Jian province did something that violated the laws of the Guangzhou torture room, could they leave any obvious loopholes? Moreover, Fang Jingyuan was not only pedantic to outsiders, he was also very strict with his own people. This caused his subordinates to have a lot less gray income, causing complaints. His reputation was even worse than the previous few mediocre inspectors. But now, everything that Chu Xiu displayed made them see something different. That was domineering. The Guangzhou torture room was originally revered in the land of Guangzhou. In the end, they lived such a sullen life. Just as Chu Xiu said, they should let the sects and aristocratic families know what it meant to be in awe and who should be the master of the land of Guangzhou. It didn't matter if you were guilty or not, and it didn't matter if they had evidence on their side. In any case, as long as they said you were guilty, you were guilty. It was that simple. Of course, what made these constables approve of Chu Xiu the most was Chu Xiu's generosity. He gave them 20% of the Jiang family's resources. This was already a very generous move. Looking at Chu Xiu's current attitude, it was likely that he would be like this in the future. Seeing the momentum of these people, Chu Xiu nodded in satisfaction. When Chu Xiu first saw these constables under Jianghu Prefecture, he felt that these people were shrouded in a sense of lethargy. Their morale was extremely low. This was not a good sign. Now that there was a great reward, these people had some motivation. Of course, in Chu Xiu's opinion, their strength was still somewhat low. Maybe it was because Chu Xiu had stayed with the assassins in the Heavenly Sin branch for a long time and liked to use them as a benchmark. That was why he felt that the constables in Jianghu Prefecture Inspector Hall were weak. In fact, the strength of these people was considered relatively outstanding among the warriors of the same rank, and the assassins in the Heavenly Sin branch were the elites among the warriors of the same rank. Otherwise, if the Heavenly Sin branch leader had relaxed the selection of assassins, the Heavenly Sin branch wouldn't only have a pitiful 100 people. Du Guangzhong and the other two looked at each other. It was only now that they seemed to understand some of official Chu's style of doing things. However, this feeling was not bad. At the very least, it was much better than Fang Jingyuan and the previous few inspectors. Take some people and bring all the items back to the inspector hall. Also, let your subordinates spread the Jiang family's crime to all the cities in Jianghu Prefecture. Thoroughly prove their crimes, Chu Xiu ordered. Yes, my lord. Du Guangzhong and the other two cupped their hands and immediately carried out the order. A day later, in the Shang Prefecture that was close to Jianghu Prefecture, Wei Hanshan received the news from his subordinates. His expression suddenly changed and he said coldly, "This Chu Xiu is simply too audacious." Chapter 164. Wei Hanshan did not have a close relationship with the Jiang family. After knowing that the Jiang family was destroyed by Chu Xiu, Wei Hanshan was so angry because Chu Xiu had affected his interests. The Jiang family had promised to transfer a part of their business to the Shangzhou Prefecture, so that he could also get a part of the filial piety. But now that the Jiang family was destroyed by Chu Xiu, who could he ask for his part of the filial piety? Moreover, Chu Xiu's way of doing things was simply breaking the rules. It was normal for some sects or aristocratic families in Guangzhou to secretly do some illegal but highly profitable business such as smuggling. As long as they did not cause too much trouble, basically no one would care. But at the same time, these sects and aristocratic families would also give some filial piety to their superiors to let them go or pretend that they did not see what they had done. These were some of the unspoken rules that the Guangzhou torture room had in secret. But now, Chu Xiu's domineering behavior had broken these unspoken rules. Although Chu Xiu was doing this in his own territory, he was representing the Guangzhou torture room. His actions did not only implicate him. What nonsense! Wei Hanshan snorted coldly. He immediately called for people to change into the clothes of the Guangzhou torture room and go to the Jianghu Prefecture. These secret unspoken rules were not set by the Guangzhou torture room, but they were the benefits that the inspectors obtained after compromising with the local martial arts forces. It was unknown whether the entire Guangzhou torture room was like this, but it was what they did in Guanxi. Now that Chu Xiu, a newcomer who did not know anything, broke these unspoken rules, it was hard to guarantee that Wei Hanshan and the other inspectors would not be treated as enemies by the sects in the martial arts world. When that happened, it would be difficult to collect the money. In the Jianghu Prefecture, Chu Xiu was personally leading people to divide the treasures and resources obtained from the Jiang family. Although these things were in triplicate, they could not be distributed at will. Naturally, they had to prioritize their own interests first. Therefore, Chu Xiu would make a selection in advance and let others categorize them according to his standards. Then he would choose what he needed first. At this moment, Du Guangzhong suddenly walked in and said, "My lord, the Shang Prefecture's patrol inspector Wei Hanshan is here." Chu Xiu frowned. What is he doing here? Chu Xiu hadn't forgotten Wei Hanshan's attitude towards him when they were at the Guanxi Torture Hall's branch. It wasn't friendly at all. Du Guangzhong smiled bitterly and said, "Sir Wei's mood seems to be somewhat bad, so this subordinate did not dare to ask too much." "Then let's go meet him," Chu Xiu said lightly. With Wei Hanshan's sudden visit, Chu Xiu could roughly guess the other party's intentions. Apart from him destroying the Jiang clan, what else could attract the other party's attention? When Chu Xiu arrived at the meeting hall, Wei Hanshan was already sitting there waiting with a gloomy expression. When he saw Chu Xiu walk in, Wei Hanshan immediately snorted coldly and said, "Chu Xiu, how dare you? You've only taken over as patrol inspector for a few days, yet you've already caused such a huge commotion. You actually dared to destroy the Jiang clan, a family with such a long history without any evidence. Do you still have any respect for the Guangzhong torture room's rules?" Chu Xiu sat down calmly and took a sip of tea. Then he raised two fingers and said lightly, "First, I have evidence to destroy the Jiang clan. I, Chu Xiu, have always done things with reason and evidence. Why would I take action without evidence? Second." Chu Xiu raised his head and revealed a trace of coldness in his eyes. He said, "Who do you think you are? Do you have the right to control whether I'm bold or not? Don't forget that you and I are both inspectors. You can't control me if you want to meddle in other people's business." When he heard Chu Xiu's words, Wei Hanshan's expression immediately became extremely gloomy. Indeed, he and Chu Xiu were both inspectors. However, Chu Xiu was only a physical invulnerability expert, while he was already an expert who had condensed the 3 flowers above the crown. Wei Hanshan laughed coldly at the other party's provocation and said, "Who do I think I am? Fine, fine, fine. Today I'll show you who I really am. Don't think that just because you joined the Guangzhong torture room and became an inspector, you can be on equal footing with us inspectors of Guanxi. Whether it's inside the Guangzhong torture room or outside the Guangzhong torture room, it all depends on strength." As soon as he finished speaking, a long, narrow, and slender silver-white long saber appeared in Wei Hanshan's hand. A dense chill lingered on the edge of the saber. When the saber slashed out, the icy cold Gang Qi was like a silver waterfall, slashing toward Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu moved later but arrived first. The blood-refined divine Gang on the red-sleeve saber sword, and the scarlet Gang Qi collided with Wei Hanshan's saber. Suddenly there was an explosion of Gang Qi. Both Wei Hanshan's Gang Qi and the saber's Gang Qi disappeared in midair. It was actually a draw. Wei Hanshan's eyes suddenly revealed a touch of surprise. He didn't use his full strength in that attack just now. After all, they were both inspectors. He could teach Chu Xiu a lesson, but he couldn't kill Chu Xiu in public. Even so, he was still a realm stronger than Chu Xiu. Unexpectedly, Chu Xiu's Gang Qi was really terrifying. That Gang Qi, which contained an astonishing amount of blood Qi and evil Qi, could easily block his Gang Qi. Wei Hanshan snorted coldly and changed the momentum of his saber. Endless cold Qi condensed on the edge of his saber, and the Gang Qi stretched for dozens of feet. In terms of accumulation, he was, after all, an expert who had condensed the 3 flowers above the head. In terms of strength, his strength far exceeded Chu Xiu's. The momentum of the saber whistled down like a gale. Wherever it passed, the cold Qi actually condensed a layer of ice on the ground. The red-sleeve saber in Chu Xiu's hand had already condensed a trace of black mist around it. The power of the 3 blades of Avicii was displayed and slashed down with a loud bang. The evil chill was even stronger than Wei Hanshan's ice Gang Qi. Infernal hell bloomed, and the power of the 3 blades of Avicii shocked even Wei Hanshan. He had been an inspector in the Guangzhong torture room for several years. He had come into contact with all kinds of demonic murderers, so he had a relatively good understanding of demonic cultivation methods. However, no matter which demonic murderer's cultivation method, it was not as evil and terrifying as Chu Xiu's saber. With a loud explosion of Gang Qi, the 3 blades of Avicii directly defeated Wei Hanshan's saber. The power even made Wei Hanshan's heart palpitate. At this time, Chu Xiu still did not stop. Instead, the black Qi on his saber became thicker. He was actually preparing to break out the second blade of the 3 blades of Avicii. Just as Wei Hanshan had said before, whether it was inside the Guangzhong torture room or outside the Guangzhong torture room, as a warrior, everyone had to look at their strength. Although Chu Xiu and Wei Hanshan were both Guanxi inspectors, it was obvious that Wei Hanshan and the others had never treated Chu Xiu as an existence on the same level as them. If it were someone else, would Wei Hanshan dare to come and reprimand Chu Xiu directly? That would be a provocation. He would only send someone to find out the other party's attitude and background, and would not act as overbearing as he was now. Therefore this time Chu Xiu did not have the slightest intention of holding back. Didn't you want to look at my strength? Fine, today I will show you my strength. Feeling the power contained in Chu Xiu's saber, Wei Hanshan's eyes revealed a hint of ruthlessness. This time he had only planned to teach Chu Xiu a lesson, but he did not expect his opponent to be so domineering. Moreover, his strength was somewhat beyond his imagination. He was only in the physical invulnerability stage, and yet he was able to fight with him to this extent. No wonder he had entered the Longhu list. However, a physical invulnerability stage was still a physical invulnerability stage, and the gap of a large realm was not that easy to make up for. Wei Hanshan grasped the long saber in his hand, and all the gang qi in his body condensed on the long saber. The cold gang qi actually underwent a very strange change, condensing into ice crystals that circled around his long saber like snowflakes. In the past, Wei Hanshan had once traveled to the far north snow mountain to observe the scene of an avalanche and comprehend the true meaning of martial arts. He had also once sparred with the warriors of the far north snow mountain, and finally created this move, Parting Ice Slash, as his trump card. Unless he was facing an extremely difficult opponent, Wei Hanshan would not use this move easily. The impact of condensing the ice true qi was like an avalanche. It was indeed powerful, but the backlash was also great, so he would not use it often. But now that he was facing Chu Xiu, he was already forced to this extent by a physical invulnerability stage martial artist. If he did not use his trump card, he might really be at a disadvantage in the hands of Chu Xiu. Just as the two were about to explode with their strongest attacks, a figure rushed in front of them. His gang qi dissipated like a cool breeze, diluting the heavy atmosphere between the two. The person who suddenly appeared was the Lin State Prefecture's inspector, Jiang, who was also one of the inspectors who worked closely with Chu Xiu. At this moment, Jiang cupped his hands in greeting and said with a smile, "Both of you, we are all colleagues, so why must we fight? The Guangzhong torture room is internal strife, and the spectators are outsiders, so please calm down first." Seeing Jiang Taoran's appearance, Chu Xiu and Wei Hanshan knew that they would not be able to fight this time, so they snorted coldly and put away their weapons. But when Chu Xiu looked at Jiang Taoran's smiling face, his eyes revealed a hint of deep meaning. This person was also not easy to deal with. Lin State City, the center of the Lin State Prefecture, was not far from Jianghu City, so he should have arrived long ago. But in the end he did not appear earlier or later, but waited until the crucial moment of his battle with Wei Hanshan to act as a peacemaker. Clearly he had his own intentions. If Chu Xiu did not show his strength, then Jiang Taoran would probably have to wait until he was seriously injured before he stepped in to be the peacemaker. He would not let the matter get out of hand, and at the same time, he would gain his gratitude. Wei Hanshan looked at Chu Xiu and said coldly, "Chu Xiu, you have run amok and broken the rules of the Guangzhong torture room. This matter is not over. I will report this matter to Lord Wei and let him handle it. If we continue to let someone like you be the inspector, the reputation of the Guangxi torture room branch will be ruined by you." After saying that, Wei Hanshan snorted coldly and turned to leave. Chapter 165. After Wei Hanshan left, Jiang Taoran shook his head at Chu Xiu with a bitter smile. "Brother Chu, it seems like you've caused quite a bit of trouble this time. Generally speaking, disputes between inspectors would not be reported to Lord Wei, but this time, it seems like you've angered Wei Hanshan to the point that he actually reported this matter to Lord Wei." What Chu Xiu did not affect him at all. Every inspector had their own ways of making money. Jiang Taoran was a slicker, and the way he did things was more secretive. On the surface, he naturally received bribes from the martial arts forces under him, but in reality he was secretly supporting a small aristocratic family that specialized in smuggling. All the money they obtained belonged to him, so what the other sects and aristocratic families thought had little to do with him. He only appeared here to fish in troubled waters. If Wei Hanshan could get rid of Chu Xiu, he would also be interested in the Jian province prefecture. On the other hand, if Chu Xiu made Wei Hanshan lose face, he would also be in a good mood. This was because his relationship with Wei Hanshan was not considered good. A part of the Shang province prefecture was bordered by his Lin province prefecture, and there were many conflicts between the two sides. Looking at Jiang Taoran, Chu Xiu said indifferently, I will explain to Lord Wei. So what if Wei Hanshan is dissatisfied? We are both inspectors, can he eat me? Jiang Taoran's face revealed a trace of an inexplicable smile. All right then, I will wait to see official Chu's response. After saying this, Jiang Taoran also left. Outside the meeting hall, Du Guangzhong and the others walked out with a worried expression. Lord, if Wei Hanshan reports this matter to Lord Wei Juduan, it will be very troublesome. The reason why a patrol was called a patrol was that this position had the authority to patrol an area. However, they were only an inspector, not a manager. If Chu Xiu did such a big thing behind Wei Juduan's back, it was hard to guarantee that Wei Juduan would not be angry. Chu Xiu asked, Do you still remember that I asked you to split half of the loot from destroying the Jiang clan? Du Guangzhong was stunned and said, Yes, but shouldn't those be handed over to the Guangzhong torture room? Chu Xiu's face revealed a hint of confusion. That was prepared to be handed over to Lord Wei. In Guanxi, Lord Wei represents the Guangzhong torture room. Du Guangzhong nodded thoughtfully. They seemed to have guessed something. Wei Hanshan's words were not meant to scare Chu Xiu. He had lost face in front of Chu Xiu. Even with his strength, he was unable to suppress Chu Xiu. Of course, he would report this matter to Wei Juduan. Although this kind of behavior felt like a complaint, it was also the most effective. Although it could be said that Chu Xiu had been recommended to the Guangzhong torture room by Chu Yuanxing, if he could not maintain his position as inspector, then he could not blame Wei Juduan for not giving Chu Yuanxing any face. 3 days later, the Guanxi torture chamber sent someone to summon Chu Xiu to discuss matters at the branch. In reality, it was to ask him about the Jiang clan's extermination. When Chu Xiu arrived at the Guanxi torture chamber's meeting hall, other than Wei Juduan, the other 5 inspectors were also present. Other than Wei Hanshan, who was looking at Chu Xiu maliciously, the others were also sizing up Chu Xiu with a strange gaze. Exterminating a large clan right after taking office was something that even they, who had been patrol envoys for over a decade, did not dare to do. Wasn't Chu Xiu's actions a little too audacious? Wei Juduan sat on the main seat. Although he was old, his gaze was as sharp as an eagle's. Even he had not expected that Chu Xiu, who had been recommended to the Guangzhong torture room by Chu Yuanxing, would be so daring. He had exterminated a powerful clan right after taking over the position of inspector. In reality, the Guangzhong torture room had destroyed many clans, especially after Guan Xiu had taken over the Guangzhong torture room. In the past, when Chu Kuanga had taken over the Guangzhong torture room, the Guangzhong torture room had established itself in Guangzhong because of Chu Kuanga's personal charisma. In Guangzhong, whether it was the torture chamber or the clans and sects, they were all obedient to Chu Kuanga. Even if some people had small schemes, they did not dare to show it. When Guan Xiu had taken over the Guangzhong torture room, he had relied on harsh punishments. Anyone who violated the rules of the Guangzhong torture room, even if they were his personal disciples, would not be spared. Therefore, at that time, if there was anyone in Guangzhong who disobeyed the rules of the torture chamber, their clan would be exterminated without any mercy. Of course, that was only 30 years ago when Guan Xiu had just taken over the Guangzhong torture room. Now that the Guangzhong torture room had stabilized, and the various inspectors and torturers had great power, they had a tacit understanding with the local martial arts factions. This kind of thing had not happened for a while. What truly infuriated Wei Juduan that Chu Xiu had done such a thing was that the Jiang family had some connection to him. During his birthday, the Jiang clan had gifted him a precious heart-warming jade Buddha statue. Wei Juduan still remembered this. In the end, only a short time had passed, and the Jiang family had been destroyed by his own subordinates. This was a slap to his face. How would the people of Guanxi look at him now? Looking straight at Chu Xiu, Wei Juduan said coldly, Chu Xiu, I need an explanation for this. The Guangzhong torture room is not a place where you can do whatever you want. In an instant, a solemn pressure attacked Chu Xiu, almost making it difficult for him to breathe. In fact, in terms of strength, the old Wei Juduan was naturally no match for the Heavenly Sin Branch leader, but in terms of power, the Heavenly Sin Branch leader was far inferior to Wei Juduan. The Heavenly Sin Branch leader had been a lone assassin in the Blue Dragon Society headquarters. Later on, he had been in charge of the Heavenly Sin Branch leader, but he had only had 100 or so subordinates, not even as many as Chu Xiu's subordinates. Meanwhile, Wei Juduan had been in charge of Guanxi for decades, and he was even more experienced than Hall Master Guan Xiu. There were thousands of constables and bailiffs under him, and they were all elites of the martial arts world. With this kind of power, Wei Juduan, who had been in a high position for many years, naturally had an aura that was even stronger than the heavenly Sin branch leaders. Under Wei Juduan's pressure, Chu Xiu stood up and cupped his hands. "Milord, the Jiang family smuggled contraband and disregarded the laws of the Guanzhong torture room. Their crimes are punishable by death. I have done everything according to the rules." Before Wei Juduan could speak, Wei Hanshan sneered. "Rules? Are your so-called evidence the rules? Chu Xiu, do you take us for idiots?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Let's not talk about whether or not I take you for an idiot. Milord Wei is asking questions here, so what right do you have to speak? Or do you think that your status is high enough to compare to Milord Wei's?" Wei Hanshan choked on Chu Xiu's words. Feeling Wei Juduan's gaze on him, he could only angrily snort and say no more. Chu Xiu cupped his hands at Wei Juduan. "Milord, there is a reason for destroying the Jiang family. However, the reason involves a few secrets. I would like to report it to you alone." Hearing this, Wei Hanshan immediately frowned. Without him in front of him, who knew what kind of sophistry this Chu Xiu would spout? However, Wei Juduan was already very dissatisfied with his interruption, so Wei Hanshan didn't dare say anything else. Looking deeply at Chu Xiu, Wei Juduan said indifferently, "Come in with me." Coming to a study, Wei Juduan said coldly, "Speak, but let me remind you, think carefully before you speak. Don't think that I am senile. The Guanzhong lands are not in my grasp. I know exactly what you did in the Jiang family." Chu Xiu cupped his hands and said, "Milord, I do not have evidence to destroy the Jiang family. I also know some of the secret rules of the Guanzhong torture room. In destroying the Jiang family this time, I have already plundered all the wealth and resources of the Jiang family. I will offer half of it to Milord." Wei Juduan froze at these words. He had guessed that Chu Xiu would have a glib tongue to defend himself, but he had not guessed that Chu Xiu would say something like this. Wei Juduan narrowed his eyes and said, "Are you bribing me? I did not think that the person that great hero Chu recommended into the Guanzhong torture room would be this kind of person." Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "Although I was recommended into the Guanzhong torture room by great hero Chu, I am not the kind of person who cannot recognize reality. The previous patrol inspector Fang Jingyuan is a good example. I can be upright and outspoken, I can also be impartial, but the prerequisite is that I have sufficient strength. My strength is insufficient, so this method does not suit me." Wei Juduan sized up Chu Xiu. In truth, he was somewhat surprised. He had thought that for Chu Xiu to be recommended into the Guanzhong torture room by Chu Yuanxing, he would definitely be someone like Fang Jingyuan. He did not think that Chu Xiu would be able to see it so clearly. However, Wei Juduan still said coldly, "If you want to use half of the Jiang family's assets to fool this matter, I'm afraid you are thinking too simply. I might as well be frank with you. The Jiang family is very tactful and I am very satisfied. But in the end, you destroyed the Jiang family without my permission. Have you ever taken me seriously? If I do not punish you this time, how will the martial arts forces in Guanxi see me? The Guanzhong torture room has rules. The rules are like this in the open and the rules are like this in the dark." Chu Xiu laughed coldly in his heart. His immediate superior's appetite was really big. Even half of the Jiang family's assets could not satisfy his appetite. However, the current Wei Juduan was in line with Chu Xiu's previous conjecture. This old torturer had probably completely abandoned his duty as the torturer of the Guanzhong torture room and only cared about his own interests. However, this was a good thing for Chu Xiu. If Wei Juduan was really fair, strict, and outspoken, Chu Xiu would not have dared to do things so ruthlessly. Chu Xiu bowed to Wei Juduan and said with a solemn expression, "Sir Wei, rules are rules. This time, I attacked the Jiang family not only because they were disrespectful to me, but also because the Jiang family has been secretly tarnishing your reputation, Sir Wei. The Jiang family gifted Lord Wei a heart-calming and warm jade Buddha, but in the end, the Jiang family secretly used this to intimidate others and committed outrages in Jianzhou Prefecture, all using Lord Wei's name. The Jiang family even said in secret that since the money has been spent, of course they have to maximize your remaining value, Sir Wei." Chapter 166. Wei Juduan found the words surplus value exceptionally grating on his ears. The main experts of the Guanzhong torture room were the 4 disciplinary officers and the leaders of the punishment bureau. The leader of the punishment bureau needed to be strong enough, while the disciplinary officers needed to be strong enough. Otherwise, they would not be able to control so many inspectors and martial sects under their command. Wei Juduan's position as the disciplinary officer had something to do with his ability, but it was mostly because of his seniority. Wei Juduan had been in the Guanzhong torture room for over 100 years. His seniority was even greater than Guan Xiyu's. This seniority meant that as long as Wei Juduan did not make any major mistakes, his position would be more stable than anyone else's. But at the same time, it also meant that he was about to retire. The Guanzhong torture room was not a place to retire. Some of the martial artists in the aristocratic families were old, but because of their bloodline, even if they could not fight, they would still be called ancestors and be revered by their descendants. The sects were also very respectful to these old martial artists. Usually they would give them the position of Grand Elder, which was a very respectable position. Only the Guanzhong torture room was different. After the martial artists in the Guanzhong torture room retired, they were not allowed to interfere with the power of the Guanzhong torture room. Even their subordinates would cut off all relations with them and be loyal to their new superiors. As the saying went, a new ruler would have a new group of subordinates. This was the rule of the Guanzhong torture room. It allowed the power to always be in the hands of a small number of people. It was not like those large sects and aristocratic families, where there would always be some old people pointing fingers and telling them what to do, affecting the authority of the family head or sect leader. Wei Juduan was already very old. He would probably retire in a few years. At that time, it would be the turn of a new disciplinary officer. That was why in the last few years of his position as the disciplinary officer, Wei Juduan's table manners were so unsightly that he had reached the point of being greedy. He did not care about the laws of the Guanzhong torture room at all. He was thinking about his future after he retired. But although he was prepared to give up his power after he retired, he could not tolerate outsiders discussing these things. Wei Juduan narrowed his eyes and asked Chu Xiu in a cold voice, "Did the Jiang family really say that?" Chu Xiu said righteously, "Of course that's what I said. If Lord Wei doesn't believe me, you can send someone to investigate. Recently, the Jiang clan has been borrowing Lord Wei's name to intimidate others and have done all kinds of things that are out of line. The people of the Jiang clan were not idiots. Of course, they would not say such things in public, but in reality the Jiang clan had always been doing so. After all, the Jiang clan had paid a huge price to establish a connection with Wei Juduan. Who knew how long Wei Juduan would be able to hold the position of the disciplinary officer? Of course, they had to make the best use of their resources. They wanted to obtain as many benefits as possible while Wei Juduan was still the disciplinary officer. As long as Wei Juduan sent people to inquire, he would be able to easily find out about these matters. At that time, whether or not the Jiang clan had said such things would no longer be important. In any case, the direct descendants of the Jiang clan were all dead. Their previous actions could represent everything. And at this moment, Chu Xiu took another step forward and said in a low voice, "Lord Wei, this subordinate has something else to say, but I don't know if I should say it." Wei Juduan narrowed his eyes and said, "What is it?" Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "The Jiang clan dares to say such things not only because the people of the Jiang clan have forgotten their principles for the sake of profit, but also because they see that Lord Wei is about to retire and step down as the disciplinary officer. They no longer have any power, so their fear of you has greatly decreased. Lord Wei, after you step down as the disciplinary officer, you will definitely have to cultivate in the Guanxi region. And the few patrols under your command, forgive me for being blunt, only know how to scheme against each other. I'm afraid that after you step down they will all be gone." When he heard Chu Xiu's words, Wei Juduan's expression turned a little ugly. This was because Chu Xiu's words were exactly what he was thinking. Wei Juduan had always been a very greedy person, including his own people. Thus, he controlled the Guanxi region by relying on his qualifications and some trickery. He didn't have a single trusted aide that he was willing to spend a large sum of money to groom. However, although he didn't have any trusted aides that he could rely on, he was still able to manage the people in the Guanxi region in an orderly manner with his strength and experience. But now that he was about to step down as the disciplinary officer, he realized that he didn't even have a single person that he could rely on. He could hear the meaning behind Chu Xiu's words. It was nothing more than a way of expressing his loyalty. However, Wei Juduan still sized up Chu Xiu and said indifferently, "You mean that you can become my trusted aide? But your backer is Chu Yuanxing. Why bother coming to me, an old man who is about to retire? Moreover, you Chu Xiu aren't easy to deal with. Others are scheming against each other, but won't you be the same as them?" Chu Xiu lowered his head and looked at the ground. He said, "After all, great hero Chu isn't from the Guanzhong torture room. He can't interfere with the specific affairs of the Guanzhong torture room. The county magistrate might as well take charge. I only know that my superior is you, Lord Wei. Instead of currying favor with great hero Chu, I might as well pledge my loyalty to you, Lord Wei. Wei Juduan narrowed his eyes and subconsciously played with the dragon pattern iron ball in his hand. He said indifferently, but the crux of the problem is, why should I believe in your loyalty? Chu Xiu lowered his head and said in a low voice, the other inspectors all have a foundation in the Guanzhong torture room. I'm afraid they are all waiting for Lord Wei to retire so that they can have a chance to take over, or to cozy up to the new disciplinary officer. In the entire Guanxi branch, only I, Chu Xiu, have no foundation at all. I need Lord Wei's support to have a foothold in the Guanxi region. Without Lord Wei, I'm nothing. Even if you've retired, I still need Lord Wei's connections and prestige in the Guanxi region. So, you don't have to worry about whether I'm loyal to you or not. As long as I have any intention of disobeying you, Lord Wei, you can take everything away from me at any time. Wei Juduan looked at Chu Xiu in surprise. He had been in the Guanzhong torture room for so many years, and he had seen Wei Juduan fawning over him. He had also seen Wei Juduan who feared him or expressed loyalty to him. The only person he had never seen before was someone like Chu Xiu. To show his loyalty, Chu Xiu would directly hand over his own weaknesses to him. However, this feeling was very good. Just as Chu Xiu had said, he had no foundation in the Guanxi region. Just like today's matter, Wei Juduan could deal with him or not. It all depended on his mood and attitude. Now that the other inspectors were fully fledged and had their own foundations, they were no longer someone an old man like him who was about to retire could casually deal with. So, as long as he accepted Chu Xiu's loyalty, it was equivalent to him gaining an inspector who was completely under his control. Wei Juduan put his dragon pattern iron ball on the table and said in a deep voice, "It's very simple for you to pledge loyalty to me, and it's also very simple for me to accept your loyalty. However, the crux of the problem is, what can I get from you and what can you get from me?" Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "What I want is only to obtain Milord's trust. Just like this time, as long as Milord can help me deal with the matters within the rules, then I will definitely bring Milord even more benefits. Half of the Jiang family's assets is just the beginning." Wei Juduan looked deeply at Chu Xiu and was silent for a long time. Finally he said, "I hope my choice is not wrong and you'd better not disappoint me." "Please rest assured, Lord. I will definitely not disappoint you." Chu Xiu lowered his head, a faint smile appearing at the corners of his mouth. He knew that Wei Juduan would definitely agree in the end because compared to what he needed Wei Juduan needed him more. For a torture master who was about to retire and lose some power, Wei Juduan had already given up on all the rules of the Guanzhong torture room. As long as it could bring him benefits, he would greedily swallow it up. Now that Chu Xiu could bring him benefits, he could not and would not refuse. At this time, outside the meeting hall, Wei Hanshan was already a little anxious. Only the heavens knew what Chu Xiu had said to Wei Juduan and why the two of them had not come out after so long. At this time, Wei Juduan and Chu Xiu walked back into the meeting hall. Chu Xiu's face was expressionless, but Wei Hanshan was already a little anxious. The calmer Chu Xiu was, the more it showed that this matter would not develop in the direction he expected. As expected, Wei Juduan directly said to the crowd, "Chu Xiu, I have already asked about this matter. The Jiang family secretly smuggled contraband and violated the rules of the Guanzhong torture room. Furthermore, they used my name to commit crimes outside. They should be killed." Chu Xiu, a newly appointed patrol inspector, was able to dig out this cancer of the Jiang family. Not only should he not be punished for this matter, he should be rewarded instead. When they heard this, everyone's expression suddenly changed. What did Chu Xiu say to Wei Juduan to actually make Wei Juduan stand on his side so clearly? Wei Hanshan even stood up and said with an expression of dissatisfaction, "Lord, this Chu Xiu does not follow the rules when he does things. He has already brazenly done it. Is this still not a problem?" Wei Juduan's expression immediately darkened. He looked coldly at Wei Hanshan and said, "Are you teaching me how to do things? Do you need me to go talk to Master Guan and give up my position as torture officer to you right now?" When he heard this, Wei Hanshan could only sullenly sit back down and said in a muffled voice, "This subordinate does not dare." Wei Hanshan's connections in the Guanxi region could be said to be deep-rooted. Other than the Guanzhong torture room, he even had connections in the Guanzhong martial world. However, no matter how strong his connections were, Wei Juduan was still the Guanxi torture officer. He was someone who held great power. If he said something was right, even if it was wrong, it was still right. At least before Wei Juduan officially retired and relinquished his power, Wei Hanshan did not dare to directly confront Wei Juduan. Chapter 167. The 5 inspectors present didn't know what Chu Xiu had said to Wei Juduan, but they knew that since Wei Juduan had made a decision, Chu Xiu didn't do anything wrong, then he didn't do anything wrong. Whoever dared to object would be slapping Wei Juduan in the face. Other than Wei Hanshan, the others didn't have any direct conflicts with Chu Xiu. Of course they wouldn't provoke Wei Juduan at this time. Looking at everyone present, Wei Juduan said indifferently, "Since it's like this, then disperse. Remember to manage your own territory. Don't worry about other people's matters." Actually, Wei Juduan had a good impression of Wei Hanshan. Although this subordinate of his had always been a little scheming, he knew how to be filial to him and did things very well on the surface. But in the end he was a little muddle-headed today and actually dared to refute his orders in front of everyone. This needed to be taught a lesson. Chu Xiu revealed a trace of a smile, stood up and cupped his hands. "Yes, sir." After saying that, Chu Xiu was the first to leave the meeting hall. The others also left one after another. Only Wei Hanshan left with a gloomy expression. After everyone left, a young man in his 30s walked into the meeting hall and bowed respectfully to Wei Juduan. "Foster father." Wei Juduan looked at the young man in front of him and nodded. "Yang Ling, how is the matter with the sects in Last Sun Prefecture?" Yang Ling said, "It has been handled properly. Those sects think that foster father is about to retire, so they have some ideas that they shouldn't have. This child has already brought people to teach them a lesson." Wei Juduan nodded and said, "That's right. Some people just need to be taught a lesson." Yang Ling paused and asked, "Foster father, I saw everything clearly just now. It was clearly Chu Xiu who broke the rules. Why are you still covering for him?" Wei Juduan glanced at him and revealed a faint smile. "What? Are you afraid that Chu Xiu will affect your position?" "I don't dare." Yang Ling quickly cupped his hands. Wei Juduan said indifferently, "You don't need to think too much. From now on Chu Xiu is my man. However, he won't affect your position. After all, Chu Xiu is just an outsider, but you are my adopted son who I have raised for more than 10 years. Due to the rules of the Guanzhong torture room, I can't help you get to a higher position for the time being. Even Master Guan's disciple, Wuxia, can only be an ordinary secret agent in the criminal division. Even if I wanted you to be an inspector, the rules wouldn't allow it. After I retire, I will support you to the position of patrol and let this Chu Xiu assist you. At that time, even if the new penal officer takes office, there will still be a place for you in Guanxi." Yang Ling immediately showed a grateful look and said, "Thank you, foster father." However, although Yang Ling expressed his gratitude, he was sneering in his heart. He had been at Wei Juduan's beck and call for more than 10 years. How could he not know what his foster father was like? He said he was worried about the rules of the Guanzhong torture room, but in reality he didn't want him to be in power. Wuxia was indeed an ordinary secret agent in the criminal division, but he acted on Guan Siyu's warrant. His position in the criminal division was second only to the leaders. Yang Ling could only listen to Wei Juduan's orders. When Wei Juduan needed him, he could borrow Wei Juduan's power and strength. It was equivalent to being an errand boy for Wei Juduan. In the end, he had been running for more than 10 years. He had long been dissatisfied with this situation. However, other than being dissatisfied, he could only endure. He could only endure until Wei Juduan retired. Only then could he truly be in power. At this time, in Wei Hanshan's mansion in the Shangzhou prefecture, Wei Hanshan, who had returned to his mansion, was so angry that he smashed several cups. "Old fool, you're about to retire and leave, yet you're still playing this game with me." When he thought of Wei Juduan's attitude, Wei Hanshan was so angry that the roots of his teeth itched. Among the patrol envoys in the Guanxi area, Wei Hanshan wasn't the strongest, but he was the best at making money among those of the same rank. Not only did he manage the Shangzhou and Qinzhou prefectures in good order, but he also gave Wei Juduan a lot of filial piety. He also used his status in the Jianghu to help Wei Juduan a lot. However, today he sided with Chu Xiu in front of everyone and even gave him a warning. This made Wei Hanshan feel unusually angry. However, he had also been Wei Juduan's subordinate for more than 10 years, so he knew what kind of person his superior was. Wei Juduan was naturally suspicious, unkind, and greedy. He treated his foster son like this, let alone others. This time, Wei Juduan was standing on Chu Xiu's side because Chu Xiu had taken out enough money to move Wei Juduan. Wei Juduan was also probably wary of Wei Juduan's influence, so he gave him a warning. However, the crux of the problem was that Wei Juduan was about to retire and give up his position, yet he still firmly held onto his power and didn't give his subordinates the slightest chance. This was a little too much. Most importantly, this matter was a big blow to Wei Hanshan. He was prepared to deal with Chu Xiu, but in the end, not only did Chu Xiu not receive any punishment, but he even received a reward. Wei Hanshan, on the other hand, was disgraced. Not only would this matter affect his position in the hearts of his subordinates, but it would also affect the prestige of the forces under his jurisdiction. Not only did the Jiang clan not receive many benefits, but they also caused trouble for themselves. If he had known earlier, Wei Hanshan wouldn't have gotten involved in this mess. Of course, it was too late for Wei Hanshan to regret now. At this time, one of his trusted subordinates pushed open the door and entered. When he saw this scene, he immediately shrunk his neck and swallowed back the words he wanted to say. Wei Hanshan looked at his hesitant appearance and couldn't help but scold him. If you have something to say, then say it. Don't bother me at this time. The martial artist hurriedly said, this subordinate actually wanted to say, since Lord Wei doesn't care about this matter, why don't we report this matter to Master Guan? Chu Xiu's status is special. Although he was recommended by Great Hero Chu because of this, he has received a lot of attention. Although Master Guan won't easily care about the matters of the patrol inspector, Master Guan will definitely care about Chu Xiu. After all, he has Great Hero Chu behind him. Wei Hanshan frowned and said, what do you know? Go go go. Don't cause trouble here. After throwing that bailiff out, Wei Hanshan's eyes revealed a hint of surprise. He was actually a little tempted. As the hallmaster of the Guanzhong torture room, Guan Xiu was concerned about the matters of the entire Guanzhong torture room. The people he directly interacted with were the disciplinary officers and the leaders of the punishment bureau. He naturally wouldn't ask about the small matters of the patrol inspectors. However, Chu Xiu was personally recommended by Chu Yuanxing. Perhaps Guan Xiu would ask about it? However, the only thing Wei Hanshan was worried about was Wei Juduan's attitude. After all, he was going to report Chu Xiu over Wei Juduan. This was equivalent to slapping Wei Juduan in the face and criticizing Wei Juduan for not doing his job. If Chu Xiu was punished in the end, then Wei Juduan would also be reprimanded. But when he thought of Wei Juduan's attitude today, Wei Hanshan sneered in his heart. Since you're heartless, then don't blame me for being unjust. However, Wei Juduan had stayed in the Guanxi area for close to a century. He had accumulated too much prestige for too long. Wei Hanshan didn't dare to brazenly report Wei Juduan. Hence, Wei Hanshan planned to report this matter anonymously to the disciplinary hall's headquarters. He would first remove himself from the picture. Thinking up to this point, Wei Hanshan personally ordered a few of his trusted subordinates to secretly pass the message to the discipline hall headquarters. Several days later, inside the disciplinary hall's headquarters, Guan Xiu looked at the news that came from below. His eyes revealed a hint of surprise. Someone actually sent a report letter to him. This was really rare. This was something that had not happened for many years. Although the Guanzhong area wasn't small, it had a strict structure. Each level governed the next. It was very rare for this kind of situation of skipping a level to report happened. In the end, someone actually leaked the news to him. Clearly, there was a problem with the disciplinary hall's subordinates. They actually couldn't control their subordinates. Originally, this kind of matter that involved a low-level patrol inspector wouldn't be sent to Guan Xiu. If he had to manage everything, then wouldn't Guan Xiu be extremely busy? There were many people in the disciplinary hall's headquarters who were responsible for helping Guan Xiu deal with information and official documents. After analyzing and filtering, they would report the information that really required Guan Xiu's decision to Guan Xiu. This time, when Chu Xiu's matter was sent to Guan Xiu, it was really as Wei Hanshan thought. Because Chu Xiu had been recommended to the Guanzhong torture room by Chu Yuanxing, his status was special, so he was sent to Guan Xiu. After reading the news, Guan Xiu called out softly, "Yuqi, come in." Hearing this, Yuqi pushed open the door and entered. He said respectfully, "Master, what's the matter?" Guan Xiu handed the news to Yuqi and said, "What do you think of this news?" After Yuqi read the news, a strange look appeared in his eyes. Clearly, he hadn't expected that Chu Xiu would cause such a huge commotion the moment he took office. Furthermore, his actions were decisive and ruthless. He didn't seem like a martialist that Chu Yuanxing had recommended to the Guanzhong torture room. It looked like he had been wrong. Although Chu Xiu had been recommended to the Guanzhong torture room by Chu Yuanxing, he was definitely not the same kind of person as Chu Yuanxing. Yuqi put the news aside and raised his head to say to Guan Xiu, "Master, I'm afraid Wei Juduan is getting old. He can't even control his subordinates. I'm afraid we have to change the disciplinary hall's candidate." Guan Xiu asked for his opinion, but Yuqi didn't mention Chu Xiu at all. Instead, he directly talked about Wei Juduan. This made Guan Xiu reveal a satisfied expression. Yuqi nodded and said, "What about Chu Xiu?" Guan Xiu said indifferently, "I wasn't wrong. This Chu Xiu isn't someone who knows his place. Although he did save Chu Yuanxing, he definitely had the intention of demanding repayment. However, with his relationship with Chu Yuanxing here, I can't punish him directly. Go to Chu Xiu first and ask him one thing. Tell him that I want an explanation. If his explanation is reasonable and satisfies me, then this matter will be over. If he can't give me a reasonable explanation, then his position as a patrol inspector will be over. Just throw him into the criminal division as a low-level secret agent." "Yes, master." Yuqi nodded and immediately turned to leave. The atmosphere in the patrol hall of the Jian province prefecture was pretty good. The depressed looks of the constables and bailiffs had disappeared. In their eyes, this new lord's methods and strength were undoubtedly very brilliant. He had become famous after the battle of exterminating the Jiang family and re-established the prestige of the Jian province prefecture patrol hall. In the past, the martial arts factions that didn't take them seriously had taken the initiative to present gifts to them and befriend them. Furthermore, they could accept them openly and with a clear conscience. One had to know that when Fang Jingyuan was the patrol inspector, he was very strict with them. Accepting bribes was definitely not allowed to happen. Furthermore, in the Guanxi branch, Wei Juduan had stripped Wei Hanshan of his dignity and sided with Chu Xiu. This allowed the matter of exterminating the Jiang family to be completely forgotten. This had also completely established Chu Xiu's position. Previously, when Chu Xiu had just taken over the position of patrol, he was just an outsider. His position hadn't been completely stabilized yet. Now, regardless of whether it was internally or externally, after these few incidents, his position as patrol inspector could be said to be impregnable. He had completely stabilized his position. In the study, Chu Xiu flipped through the news that Du Guangzhong and the others had brought. In fact, there weren't many major incidents. Most of them were minor matters. After all, the Jianzhou prefecture was only so big. There were a dozen or so small cities around it. What major incidents could there be under normal circumstances? Furthermore, Chu Xiu didn't monopolize power. Du Guangzhong and the other two still had a lot of autonomy. They would handle some of the unimportant matters and give Chu Xiu a result in the end. Therefore, Chu Xiu was very relaxed as a patrol inspector. He had obtained quite a lot of cultivation resources from the Jiang family. After giving Wei Juduan and distributing them to his subordinates, there was still quite a lot left. It was enough for him to cultivate for a while. At this moment, Du Guangzhong suddenly knocked on the door and entered. With a nervous expression, he said, "Sir, Lord Yuqi from the headquarters is here. He says he wants to see you." One couldn't blame Du Guangzhong for being nervous. Yuqi's identity wasn't a secret in the Guangzhong torture room. He was Lord Guan Xiu's personal disciple. Even if his identity was just an ordinary secret agent in the criminal division, his status was actually very high. Even Wei Juduan had to be very polite to him. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Yuqi is here? Please come to the guest hall." Chu Xiu really didn't expect Yuqi to come at this time. As Guan Xiu's disciple, Yuqi often helped Guan Xiu handle various miscellaneous matters. It could be said that he was very busy. Why did he specially come to see Chu Xiu? Chu Xiu didn't have time to think too much. He directly stepped into the guest hall and put on a smile. "Brother Yuqi is here. I didn't go out to greet you. I hope you don't take offense." Yuqi took a sip of tea and said with a smile, "I am not some important person, so there is no need to greet me. Actually, I am here this time to ask you something on behalf of Master." "What is it?" Chu Xiu's expression didn't change as he asked. Yuqi took out the report letter and handed it to Chu Xiu. "Take a look at the contents. Master said that he wants an explanation, a reasonable explanation." Chu Xiu took the report letter and looked at the contents. He immediately frowned. Someone had actually reported this matter to Guan Xiu. This was indeed something he hadn't expected. Someone who did this was simply slapping Wei Juduan in the face. Moreover, it was anonymous. The amount of information contained within was very large. Chu Xiu hadn't miscalculated Wei Juduan's attitude, but he had overestimated Wei Juduan's control over Guanxi. He hadn't retired yet, but the inspectors under him didn't take him seriously. Once he retired, the tea would cool down after he left. Regarding this report letter, the first person that Chu Xiu thought of was Wei Han. After all, among the inspectors only he had the most direct conflict with him. Of course, it was also possible that the person who reported this was someone else. You might know a person's face but you didn't know his heart. Chu Xiu didn't know which people's interests he had interfered with and who didn't like him. Yuqi looked at Chu Xiu and said with a smile, "Brother Chu, Master just wants an explanation. It's very simple. Haven't you thought about it yet?" Chu Xiu slowly put down the report letter. Since Guan Xiu had sent her personal disciple, was the explanation really that simple? Perhaps it was, but if he explained it incorrectly, then he might not be able to stabilize his position as inspector for long before he had to move. After returning the report letter to Yuqi, Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "The Guanzhong torture room needs dignity. The Guanzhong torture room guards Guanzhong, but it is also the ruler of this place. The torture chamber's laws are judged by the Guanzhong torture room. Whether someone is guilty or not is also decided by the Guanzhong torture room. The Jiang family's matter has been determined, and the evidence is conclusive. They smuggled contraband and flouted the torture chamber's laws. They are guilty and deserve death. Destroying the Jiang family allowed the Jianghu Prefecture Inspector Hall to regain the dignity that belonged to the Guanzhong torture room. This deal is very worthwhile." A smile appeared on Yuqi's face. "That's right, Brother Chu. I will bring your words back to Master." From the first sentence that Chu Xiu said, Yuqi knew that Chu Xiu had passed the test. Even if he had not seen Guan Xiu, he knew the result. Most of the rules of the Guanzhong torture room were set by Guan Xiu. Compared to Chu Kuanga, who used his personal charm to influence the Guanzhong torture room, Guan Xiu used harsh punishments and rules to rule the Guanzhong torture room. Destroying the Jiang family was a small matter, and it was also a small matter whose interests it affected. The important thing was whether this matter would affect the reputation and interests of the Guanzhong torture room. Obviously, Chu Xiu's actions had only strengthened the Guanzhong torture room's prestige in the Jianghu prefecture, so his explanation was reasonable and could pass the test. Yuqi stood up and smiled. "Since that's the case, then there's nothing else. I'll leave now." Chu Xiu said, "Why are you in such a hurry, Brother Yuqi? I've already asked someone to prepare food and wine." Yuqi shook his head and said, "There's always time to drink, but this time I didn't come to Guanxi just for Brother Chu's place. I also have to pay a visit to the Guanxi Punishment Hall branch to see Lord Wei Judwan." Chu Xiu nodded thoughtfully and sent Yuqi away. He seemed to have understood something. He had passed the test, but Wei Judwan's reputation would probably be ruined. On the second day after Yuqi left, Wei Han appeared in the Jianghu Prefecture's Inspector Hall. He slowly stepped into the Inspector Hall. This time, Wei Hanshan's attitude was very fearless. Looking at Chu Xiu, Wei Han sneered. "Chu Xiu, I said before that this matter is definitely not over. Now that your outrageous actions have even alarmed the headquarters, how long can you sit in your inspector position?" Chapter 169. Wei Hanshan's Shangzhou Prefecture was very close to Jianghu Prefecture. Moreover, Yuqi did not hide his tracks when he came to Guanxi. Wei Han received the news almost as soon as Yuqi arrived at Jianghu Prefecture. When he learned that Yuqi had personally come to Jianghu Prefecture, Wei Han immediately knew that his anonymous report had been successfully delivered to Lord Guan. Otherwise, Yuqi would not have personally come to see Chu Xiu. Squinting at Wei Han, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "You are the one who secretly slandered me behind Lord Wei Judwan's back?" Wei Han sneered, "What slander? I don't know anything, so don't accuse others. It's obviously your own misdeeds that caused such a big commotion. That's why the headquarters were alerted." Although he and Chu Xiu were the only two present, Du Guangzhong and the others had retreated because they didn't dare to interfere in the matters between the two Lord Patrol envoys. Wei Han didn't dare to speak carelessly at this time. Chu Xiu said indifferently, "If you don't want others to know, then don't do it. Wei Han, it's only the two of us now. Is there any meaning in putting on an act here? Besides, what are you here for? Are you preparing to mock me?" Wei Han leisurely sat in front of Chu Xiu and said indifferently, "Of course I'm not that bored. I'm only here to discuss a deal with you." "What deal?" Wei Han said, "Chu Xiu, the trouble you caused this time has already reached the main hall. Not only will you lose your position as inspector, you may even be punished by the torture chamber. Lord Guan has always been impartial. Even if you were recommended to the Guanzhong torture room by hero Chu Yuanxing, it is useless. I heard that you destroyed the Jiang family and obtained many things from them. You should know that if you didn't secretly cause trouble, the Jiang family was prepared to give me these things as a show of filial piety. So, if you're willing to be tactful and hand over all these things to me, I can still help you. Can you help me block the investigation from the higher-ups and keep my position? Chu Xiu asked expressionlessly. Wei Hanshan sneered, you're dreaming. Who can stop the people from the main hall? However, my Shangzhou prefecture is adjacent to your Jianzhou prefecture. If the main hall sends someone down to investigate, someone will definitely ask me. The only thing I can do to help you is not to add insult to injury. Otherwise, if I say a few bad things about you, you know the consequences. You might even be severely punished by the main hall. When Chu Xiu heard this, he immediately sneered and said, Wei Hanshan, you should be the one dreaming. You reported me to Lord Guan, and now you covet the things I obtained from the Jiang clan. In the end, all the benefits are yours? Wei Hanshan only sneered and did not say anything, but his meaning was very clear. That was, he already had Chu Xiu in his hands. Chu Xiu knocked on the table with his hand and said, If I'm not wrong, you came here after seeing Yuqi leave. Based on Yuqi's speed, he has already set off for the Guanxi branch. When you return to the Shangzhou prefecture, you should receive news from Lord Wei. Wei Hanshan, you're not a fool, but you're an arrogant person. The Guanzhong torture hall has its own rules, and the Guanxi region also has its own rules. You should solve your own problems by yourself, but you insist on exposing the matter to the outside world, believing that you're infallible. I don't know if I will be removed from the position of patrol this time, but I do know that you will soon be out of luck. Wei Hanshan's expression changed slightly. He only knew that Yuqi had personally come to the Jianzhou prefecture, but he did not know what Yuqi had said to Chu Xiu. Seeing how calm Chu Xiu was, Wei Hanshan immediately felt that something was wrong. However, Wei Hanshan still said coldly, Chu Xiu, you can be stubborn to the end. When the people above come down, you will be crying. With that, Wei Hanshan hurriedly left. He wanted to return to the Jianzhou prefecture to have someone scout out the situation. Seeing Wei Hanshan's departing figure, Chu Xiu could not help but reveal a cold glint in his eyes. His foundation in Guanzhong was still shallow, and it could be said that he had just established himself. Therefore, other than his own territory, Chu Xiu really did not plan to incur grudges with others. Unfortunately, even if he did not make things difficult for others, others still insisted on making things difficult for him. Since Wei Hanshan wanted to be his enemy, there would definitely be no lack of open and covert means in the future. After all, in Guanxi, Wei Hanshan's foundation, strength, and territory were all greater than Chu Xiu's. Of course, Wei Hanshan still had a problem to overcome, and that was Wei Juduan's anger. When Wei Hanshan returned to the Shangzhou prefecture, Yuqi also arrived at the Guanxi Punishment Hall branch. After seeing Wei Juduan, Yuqi smiled and cupped his hands. Lord Wei, the Guanxi region hasn't been very peaceful recently. Someone has already reported this to Master. However, Master said that the Guanxi region's matters should be resolved by the Guanxi region itself. If Lord Wei can't resolve it, then the disciplinary hall headquarters will intervene. With that, Yuqi handed the secret letter to Wei Juduan. After reading the contents, Wei Juduan's expression immediately turned gloomy. Don't worry, I will resolve this matter. I will not trouble Master Guan anymore, and this kind of thing will definitely not happen again in the future. Yuqi smiled. That's good. I will go back and report to Master now. After Yuqi left, Wei Juduan angrily threw the dragon pattern iron ball in his hand to the ground, immediately blasting out a large pit several meters wide. Get Wei Hanshan over here. Wei Juduan had no proof that this anonymous letter was written by Wei Hanshan. However, as the Guanxi Punishment Hall's disciplinary officer, did he need proof to deal with this kind of matter? Last time he had accepted Chu Xiu's bribe, accepted Chu Xiu's loyalty, and stood on his side. In the blink of an eye, someone had reported this matter to the Punishment Hall headquarters. Who would believe that it was not Wei Hanshan who did it? Besides, even if this matter was really not Wei Hanshan's doing, it didn't matter. Wei Juduan just wanted to find someone to vent his anger on. Even if he found the wrong person, it was enough to give the other inspectors a warning. He wanted them to see the consequences of secretly playing dirty tricks. At this time, Wei Hanshan had just returned to the Shang Prefecture's Inspector Hall. He was about to send someone to inquire about the news when he heard his subordinate report that Wei Juduan wanted him to go to the Guanxi branch. When he heard this news, Wei Hanshan's heart suddenly skipped a beat. He immediately went to the Guanxi branch. At this time, not only Wei Han's Han, but Chu Xiu and the other inspectors also received the news in advance and went to the Guanxi branch. In the Guanxi Torture Hall branch's meeting hall, Chu Xiu and the other inspectors were sitting in the hall. Wei Juduan sat in the main seat with a gloomy expression. The atmosphere was extremely oppressive. When Wei Han's Han stepped into the meeting hall and felt the atmosphere, he secretly cursed in his heart. The current scene was similar to when Wei Juduan had interrogated Chu Xiu, except that the person being interrogated was him. Wei Han's Han was about to say something when he heard Wei Juduan say in a chilly tone, "I had already made up my mind about the Jiang clan's extermination. If you were dissatisfied you could have told me. But in the end you went to the main hall to complain behind my back. Do you still have me, the punishment hall, in your eyes? Or is it that the vast Guanxi branch can no longer contain you?" Wei Han's Han hurriedly said, "Sir, you've wronged me. I really didn't do anything." Wei Juduan sneered, "Who else could it be if not you? Very well, tell me. Tell me and confront me in court." Wei Han's Han was about to say something, but he immediately swallowed his words. What was he supposed to say? None of the inspectors in the Guanxi branch were people to be trifled with. If he were to randomly accuse others, he would be courting death. Can't say it? Wei Juduan's expression turned cold, and a powerful aura suddenly erupted from his body. A faint golden gang qi condensed in the meeting hall and pressed down on Wei Han's Han with the weight of Mount Tai. The bluestone tiles on the ground cracked under this powerful pressure, and the cracks extended to Wei Hanshan's feet in a straight line. The powerful pressure immediately caused Wei Hanshan's face to turn red, and his body involuntarily fell to his knees with a thud. In fact, Wei Han's Han, a warrior who had condensed the 3 flowers above his head, could withstand the aura of an expert in the oneness of heaven and man realm. Back then, Chu Xiu had used the Dugu seal of the 9 words formula to withstand the divine black spatial claw of the heavenly Sin branch leader. Now, even if Wei Han's Han did not have a defensive secret technique like the Dugu seal, he could still withstand it. However, he did not dare to do so. Wei Juduan was currently in a fit of anger. The more he resisted, the more Wei Juduan would be enraged. Even Wei Han's Han himself did not understand why Wei Juduan was so sure that he was the one who did it without any evidence. Wei Juduan was even so angry and sensitive. Wei Juduan said coldly, "I know what you are thinking. You think that I am old and about to retire, so you no longer care about me and can do whatever you want. But in the Guanxi branch, as long as Lord Guan's order does not come, I will still be the penal officer of the Guanxi branch." When Wei Juduan said this, he not only exerted his powerful aura on Wei Han's Han, but also looked at the other inspectors, including Chu Xiu, who had just chosen to be loyal to him. On the surface, his actions seemed to be punishing Wei Han's Han, but he was secretly warning the other patrol envoys. He was telling them that as long as he was still the disciplinary officer, he would have the final say in the Guanxi region. "We dare not." Chu Xiu and the others stood up and bowed in unison. Wei Juduan only retracted his aura when he heard this. He said coldly, "You should know whether you dare or not, so I won't say more. Wei Han's Han, seeing that you have been with me for many years, I will not deprive you of your inspector position this time. However, I will punish you a little to prevent you from committing a serious crime. You are in charge of 2 prefectures, so from now on, the Qin province will be managed by Jiang Taoran." As soon as he said this, everyone present immediately looked at Jiang Taoran, who had been silent all this while, with astonished gazes. "You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.